Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Taking the Pain podcast. You are joining myself today, the one and only Grimmy, and my cohort in partner in crime, stress inducer, whatever you want to call him, Bragster. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm all good. I'm all good. I haven't done much stress-inducing today. I turned up on time to the recording, and everything's gone smoothly. I am perfect in every single way. So, and also extremely humble. So,
We'll see on that one in a short while. Okay, so Bragster's doing well. I'm doing great. We've lots to talk about, so let's get into the podcast, shall we? News stories. Let's start there because there's been a few things that have come out in the past few days which are of interest. First off, we've got Joe Hendry picking up the TNT World Championship.
We believed.
And I'm waiting for Bryson to shut up chanting so I can continue on with this story. But we got there eventually. No, we did in fact believe in Joe Hendry, and he believed in himself and picked up the TNT World Championship.
TNT?
What did I just call it?
You called it TNT.
Oh, bollocks. It's the TNA Championship. Fuck's sake. My notes are wrong. Let's edit that so I don't say that a million times. So the TNA World Championship was picked up by said Joe Hendry. Thank you for correcting me, Bragster. Not going to hold that against me for the rest of this podcast life. No. So Joe Hendry picking up the TNA World Championship, beating Nick Nemeth, who I keep calling Dolph Ziggler, but he's no longer called that. Got to keep calling him Nick Nemeth, and picking it up the other night. Thoughts on Joe Hendry finally getting the championship?
Finally. That is the main thought, is finally. They should have done this at Bound for Glory. They should have done it back then. Why didn't they? Is beyond me. Like, everyone thought, it could have happened at Slammiversary. No. Get shot at Bound for Glory. No, because JB Howard had to get involved. Why? No one knows. And here we are, finally starting off the new year with him as world champion. I really thought after Bound for Glory it wasn't going to happen. And the main reason for that was I really thought that was confirmation that he was going to WWE. As the title of this video suggests, people going to WWE from TNA might be a bit different now with this whole new partnership. But I really thought that was where he was going. I thought that the Bound for Glory loss was the confirmation that basically they were just going to ride this out until the new year. Hendry would turn up in the Rumble. Hendry would be a WWE superstar from now on. Obviously, that's now different. I still believe that he will turn up in the Royal Rumble. I think that you cannot pass up the opportunity to have one of the biggest pops ever. Yeah. I think it'd be brilliant. And I think you could set a few things up with that, one of which being John Cena. Mm-hmm. I think that match has got to happen this year. I feel like it just has to now, especially if he's in the Rumble. So for me, it's a big finally. I think the entire wrestling community knows what Joe Hendry has done, knows that he deserves it, and thank the Lord he did it.
Absolutely. But to be fair, if you didn't listen to last week's podcast, Bragster did predict that Joe Hendry would sign with WWE this year, so maybe we're one step closer to it being either further away or closer. Who the hell knows?
Further away, and I may have had that exact thought the moment that the partnership was announced. I was like, there goes my bold prediction for the year.
Well, technically, if they're in a partnership, technically you will be working with the company. So
technically, I'll be correct, but it won't be. I feel like you're not going to let me win on a technicality at the end of the year.
We'll see how well I've done for that to be the case, or poorly, as I'm suspecting it might be the case. So that's the first big news story of the week. The next being that Jordynne Grace is on her way to WWE after her final match at TNA against Tessa Blanchard, I believe it is.
Yes, it was Tessa Blanchard who got a
rousing reaction from the crowd.
There's a lot of sarcasm in this statement.
Yeah.
She was beloved by the crowd
Yes.
throughout the match,
Beloved.
as it was put all over Twitter and
all
media.
over everywhere, to be fair.
It was absolutely everywhere, and the TNA fans made themselves very, very clear about their thoughts about Tessa Blanchard. And yeah, Jordynne Grace went out. She lost the match. She's very much WWE bound. Again, another name I'm expecting in the Women's Rumble.
Yeah.
Whether she goes straight to the main roster or goes down to NXT, I imagine she'll be in NXT for a little bit. But
I have thoughts on that, but more on that will come later.
I feel like, I think she'll definitely be in the Rumble.
Yeah.
For someone, I also think they might do it where she hasn't signed yet, where they can say that someone has appeared in 2 Rumble matches without actually being signed for the company. I think that'd be a statistic they might want to put across, and have Jordynne Grace have a statistic going up into the WWE sphere, knowing that she has been in 2 Rumbles without once being contracted to WWE during that time. I think that'd be a very nice statistic, and I think that's probably what they'll do. But yeah, I think it's exciting times. I think Jordynne Grace has been someone I have kept an eye on for years now, up to this point. When TW 2020 came out, I had a classic TNA save, and Jordynne Grace was one of my go-to. She was brilliant. And then I was watching a lot of TNA back in the pandemic, and that's why I did the save. And she was a standout back then, and 5 years later, finally getting the opportunity up on a bigger stage. I really thought AEW might have pulled the trigger or wanted to do more, but they didn't, and WWE have taken advantage.
Absolutely, and very much looking forward to see what Grace can do in WWE. Really, whether, like you say, it could be starting out in NXT or on the main roster from the off. Again, I've got my own thoughts on that, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And then third story coming out, sort of the biggish story. Britt Baker potentially on her way out of AEW. Lots of reports coming out that maybe all is not well backstage with Britt Baker and the higher-ups of AEW, which, again, not the first wrestler to be unhappy in AEW at the moment.
No.
And yeah, lots of reports that she may also well be WWE bound. Now, there was some cooling of it from Brian Alvarez on his podcast last night, basically saying that her leaving is very wide of the mark, but she is unhappy at the minute. Again, a lot of dream matches, I think, for Britt to come into if she does make it to WWE. I would say more so on her side than Jordynne Grace's. I would prefer to see her in NXT first and then make her way to the main roster. But yeah, reports obviously of Baker potentially leaving AEW in the near future. Again, we haven't seen her for a while, so sort of been in limbo storyline wise, nothing really for her to get her teeth into. So
not that much since AEW All in London.
Yeah.
At all. With her match with Mercedes Moné, and to be honest, if I'm completely honest with you, from my experience of being in that crowd, that was one of the, I would say, least received matches. During the show, for whatever reason, people will put blame in multiple different spaces. They were also placed in a tough part on the card, and that is also there. But we haven't seen a lot of her. I'm a bit torn, and I might come into a bit of slack for saying this. I think she'd probably do better just going to TNA. I think that going somewhere and becoming a big star and being the face of something will be much better for her than in an NXT that, quite frankly, especially if Jordynne Grace goes there, not the main roster, it's going to be very crowded, and you're not going to get an opportunity to shine for a little amount of time, for at least 6 months. You're not really going to get a lot to do. So I feel like maybe going somewhere like a TNA, which again has that partnership now with WWE, might be smarter because the Knockouts division is brilliant, has a lot of depth, but also adding that bit of star power that they've just lost in Jordan Grace. There's a spot to fill there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll see, obviously, of course, how that plays out. Because again, AEW are probably going to hold her to a contract whenever that ends. It may well be a while till we get an answer to that very question. So
the other, sorry
go on.
to interrupt, the other person that there's a lot of question marks over, and we're not going to find out anything, I feel like, until TNA, which will be tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Josh Alexander quit in the match and said he also quit TNA. It felt very storyliney, but we don't know. Obviously, we all we know contractually is a lot of TNA contracts were up at the start of this year, including Jordan Grace's and including reportedly Josh Alexander's. So we'll, I guess, find out what happens with him. I presume even if he stays with TNA, even if that he does have a secret contract extension or whatever there, I feel like a reunion between him and Ethan Page and having the North reunite is definitely on the cards. And if they do reunite and he does sign with WWE and does go to NXT, I very much believe they'll be the ones to take it off of Fraction. Probably at Stand and Deliver. I think they might rush the getting the tag titles on the North because they are incredible. And again, you know, my love for TNA slowly seeps through every now and again. And I feel like it's seeping through again.
It's coming across. It's coming across. So, for the last news segment, or the biggest news of the week, really, TNA, we've mentioned them a few times already today, and WWE have announced a new partnership where basically they're going to be working together in the future. So, yeah, was kind of mind blown that this came out when it did a few days ago and had a few days to process it. And I suppose the main question now is it good or bad for wrestling, Bragster? Like, what are your thoughts on this new relationship that TNA and WWE have struck up? But again, it's kind of been building over the past couple of years with having certain members of TNA in the Rumble and then coming over and doing bits and pieces in WWE and vice versa. So yeah, like, what are your thoughts? Is it good for wrestling or is it bad for wrestling?
I am extremely mixed. And this is from a man that loves TNA. And I wanted nothing more than this partnership. I have loved the working relationship that they've got, but there's a difference between a working relationship and a partnership. And a working relationship means it kind of goes both ways. And a partnership means it doesn't necessarily have to. And there's a worry that this kind of becomes an evolved situation and they just become the feeder. And I don't want that because when you become a feeder, you no longer want to push people for a considerable amount of time. Per se, Josh Alexander, who's had one of the best pushes over the past year and a bit, ever since Ethan Page left to go to AEW in the first place. Josh Alexander has become one of his own. Ultimately, if that had happened and they started pushing him, WWE could have gone, zoop, and out he goes. And that stops you from actually really investing in people. And instead, resulting in flash in the pan people and flash in the pan ideas rather than actually telling stories, which TNA is so good at telling stories. It doesn't get enough credit for how well it does at telling stories. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of silly bollocks in TNA. There's so much of it, so much of it, but that's sometimes some of the best stuff. And I feel like this could be where you lose what makes TNA TNA. And my worry is more for TNA than necessarily it is for wrestling, because I feel like since this working relationship has sort of happened, whatever the effects on wrestling would be, maybe like people not wanting to go to TNA, or not wanting to sign here, or you're no longer getting the cross promotions as much from AEW and New Japan over to TNA because of this relationship. So I feel like we already felt the effects a little bit. But I think ultimately, I think it will probably be good. But I'm really not sure. If this had been under the Vince regime, then the end is nigh, run away. But when it's Triple H, and I know from all of the interviews that I've heard, Triple H has a lot of respect for TNA. He's kept an eye on TNA for a very long time, and anyone that says otherwise is naive. He's been very clear. He's kept an eye for a long time. That there's a reason why, if you look at a lot of NXT, there's a lot of inspiration from TNA. Is it a coincidence that the North American title for a very long time was to do with flippy guys? No. Like it's like that they just basically made their own X division for a little bit, and then it sort of developed. But even then, the North American title has always been a little bit more faster made matches, although the NXT title was also that for a very long time, but that's not the point. I think that, yeah, in a very long-winded way, I'm really torn. I worry a lot, and this is a way of controlling the American scene a lot more. But this is a much better working relationship than the one AEW had with TNA. So, I've got a lot more optimism in that respect. But I think that ultimately, I feel like it will come to the detriment long term for TNA. And for short term, I think it's going to do great. I think they're going to sell out arenas. But at some point, the crossovers are going to get old, just eventually, And when that happens, I worry that they won't have their own identity that they've spent years building, and will end up with another global force type ordeal with TNA where they sort of lose all of their identity that they've only just managed to get back. And yeah, I worry in that sense. And ultimately, a TNA having less power in the wrestling industry ultimately means that the wrestling industry goes down. It does, because TNA has such a good place in the industry where it gives opportunity to so many people. Like, you can easily name the amount of people that have sort of come through there and shone. And it's given opportunities for people to cross over different brands, and they do it without making a big deal and a fuss, rather than a Forbidden Door pay-per-view type ordeal. They just did it, and they always have. And I worry they're going to lose their identity, and ultimately I think that will put a detriment to the company and the business as a whole as time goes on. But for now, it's good. As time goes on, I'm not so sure.
Which is a fair concern to have. I think the concerns most people would have. I think because, again, initially it's the shiny aspect of it of, we could get these crossovers. You can get people coming to NXT. You can get people going to TNA, vice versa. I get the sort of short-term appeal of it, but long-term, like you say, does that get a bit old? When does that sort of drift away? But again, I think, like you mentioned before, I think if this was Vince in charge, it just wouldn't work, and it would be a pit fire of epic proportions, basically. But I think because of Triple H being in charge of it, we know, like you mentioned, Triple H very much has his finger on the pulse, all things wrestling. He knows what works, what doesn't. He knows when to execute at the right times. He knows when to pull away a little bit and just leave people wanting a little bit more from things. So I do think that with Triple H in charge of it, I think it is going to be a little bit different. And that's maybe why I'm a bit more on the optimistic side that this is going to work out. and that TNA isn't necessarily going to lose its appeal of being TNA, and having that sort of identity, like you mentioned before, which it's worked very hard to get back recently, and is now getting into that stride again. And of course, it'll be interesting to see if that means, I know we've got Jordan Grace going over and potentially Josh Alexander. But of course, Joe Hendry is the big name in TNA at the moment. Everyone reckons he's going to be in WWE at some point. Is this facilitating that? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, very interesting. And again, a big surprise coming out of the wrestling news sphere that this happened the other day. So with that being said, that's sort of the news section wrapped up in the first sort of 20 minutes or so. Let's get into the shows like we always do and have a bit of a weekly roundup of what we saw in wrestling. So, we'll start with Dynamite first. Again, not much of an AEW guy myself, so I'm going to hand it over to my glamorous assistant, Bragster, with his flowing locks and his witty charm, and run us through Dynamite.
Oh, you always manage to make me blush. Thank you very much.
I'm a natural. What can I say?
The first thing I have to say about AEW this week is the arena looked incredible. If you haven't had a moment to look at it, look at how this show just looked. Because you had the hard cam was actually on the entrance ramp. So you would have 3 cameras watching the entrances coming, and then you would have the hard cam watching the ring from the entrance ramp, and then the announce table was then behind the ring. So the hard cam, you could see the ramp, the ring, and the announce table, and the crowd. It looked incredible. The presentation was brilliant, and that was kept throughout both Dynamite and Collision. So before we anything on Collision, this is me mentioning it now. It looks incredible. And we started off exactly how you would want to start off, and that's Omega's return match. I wasn't sure they would do it this quickly, and then they did it in the opening match of the show. It was against Brian Cage, who we all know, quite frankly, what Brian Cage is capable of. I think the main criticism of Brian Cage is more his character work than his in-ring work, and his in-ring work here was just brilliant. Omega just got dropped on the table. The commentary just kept putting over that Omega's not 100%. So every single time Cage went for the midsection, went for the stomach, anything that would have been roughly where the surgery lied, it just commentary were hitting it home that this is hurting Omega way more than it usually would. Omega's still not 100%. He's still reeling off of the effects of it. And just immediately you were feeling the classic things you feel when a Kenny match of the jeopardy was there. The classic when Kenny is a face. And it's been a while since we've seen Kenny as a face in AEW as well. But the majority of this match was just Kenny getting beaten up and taking so many horrible moves. And Brian Cage is a big man and he's a strong man. And you were just sitting there watching in between your fingertips, just please don't hurt him. He's just come back. But it was exactly what you wanted. It was just a brilliant story. There was a brilliant near fall from a knee from Kenny Omega that got the crowd completely off of their feet. Don Callis was on commentary the entire time, and he is a blessing to wrestling. He gets it. He knows how to be a heel. He knows how to play it off. And he did the classic heelish thing on commentary. I don't know. What you're on about. I didn't betray Kenny. Despite the fact that there is video proof he betrayed Kenny. But it's not the point, is it? But it was just brilliant. Then the final part of the match, he just kicked out from the knee. You had a bit of offense from Cage. And then you had knee, V-trigger, one-winged angel. And Kenny got the win. It was just so perfectly done way. Kenny was getting beaten up, had a big moment, hit a few good moves, huge kick out, and then he just strung a few together to put the nail in the coffin. Then you had a post-match beatdown, which naturally Will Ospreay made the save. Again, I'm 90% sure we are leading to some sort of tag match. And I think this is sort of more developed actually here, where then Takeshita comes down, which we all forget is part of the Don Callis family when he's just not lingering. And then him and Omega brawl. They've obviously got a lot of history. Then Carl Fletcher comes down, and then Fletcher and Takeshita stand tall over Omega and Ospreay. Ultimately, I feel like this is leading towards multiple tag matches. Like, I think that you're going to have the one with Brian Cage and Lance Archer, and then you're going to have the big one, which is going to be Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher. If they really want to, they can have that tag match lead into a fatal four-way where you've got two Don Callis members, and then you've got Kenny and Ospreay, who have got a lot of history. I think they've got a lot of scope here, and a lot of scope where they can really drag this on without it feeling old. Because there's so many different singles matches they can put in, different tag variations they can put in, to the point where you're not going to get old of it really quickly. So they can drag this on, as we mentioned in the previous podcast, for half of this year quite easily, this entire feud that they're building up, which is brilliant because it keeps them out the title picture while also keeping a lot of momentum and raising the stock of the Don Callis family, as well as getting Omega and Ospreay on the cards all the time.
Yep.
Then you had the learning tree segment. I again, they just hyped up Collision, and I feel like I had to mention it because if I didn't, there'll be shouty people in the comments. So they appeared, and that was it. Then we had Ricochet, who is annoyingly right now a shining light. He is where this man has learnt any sort of character work, I don't know, but he's learnt it, and he's learning it quick, and I love it. That's not shade on Ricochet at all, but it's been the biggest criticism of Ricochet for a long time. And you literally had the other week, last week actually, being like, oh, we're gonna have Swerve Strickland in the casino match. Psych! No, it's Ricochet. In this one, we had the classic, and please may you all stand for the great Ricochet. And everyone was expecting someone great. It's Ricochet. There was complete booze to the point where he couldn't get a word in. This was like almost Dominic Mysterio sort of levels of just booze, not a single word was coming out of Ricochet. He shows a picture of him beating up Swerve on the screen. He went, okay, you won't let me speak? Well, pictures speak 1,000 words. And then showed a picture of Swerve Strickland getting beaten up by Ricochet. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant promo. Then Swerve's music hits, and you're like, here we go. And then Prince Nana hits him with a chair and then does the dance. It's just glorious. I love Prince Nana. He's brilliant. Swerve then returns looking like a... Shut up, Siri. Swerve then returns and looks like an absolute beast. Like, only Swerve Strickland can look this monstrous without actually being big. He just turns up and you immediately feel fear of like, oh, shit's about to go down type thing. And then he basically comes down with this chain, like just a chain, and Ricochet's on the floor, and he just looks down and just starts whipping him. He just tries to whip Ricochet. Ricochet escapes, runs in the crowd, and Swerve is like, how do I describe it? Anyone that likes horror films, he's like Michael Myers. He doesn't run, he just walks and stalks Ricochet until he leaves the building, and then turns around, walks back in the ring, and the crowd are going wild. Like, anyone that worried that Swerve's lost any momentum, watch this segment. No, he hasn't. He is still beloved by the crowd. He is still a main eventer. This feud is purely, even in a loss, will elevate Ricochet because of how big Swerve is. He has reached that level in AEW. Brilliant segment. Really enjoyed it. Ricochet is doing some brilliant work right now. Overall, great. Then we had the Hurt Syndicate versus Briscoe and Private Party. this was kind of went how we expected, but it was MVP's debut in the ring for AEW. It was also the first time that we've seen the Hurt Syndicate as a trio in an AEW ring. So that's the main reason for this match. MVP started the match and actually did a lot of offense. The ball-in elbow that he does got the biggest pop I've seen. Like, he didn't say I think he did say ballin', but you couldn't hear it because the crowd was shouting over him. It was just, like the crowd were really hot for this show, really, really hot for this show. And I think that again goes back to the opener, was just started this crowd off immediately. The Hurt Syndicate just looked really impressive. Like, it's just, they haven't lost a beat. They have not lost a beat, given the fact that these are three men who, quite frankly, haven't had a lot of matches, like over the last couple, if not few years. They've had barely any matches, let alone together. And here they are acting as if nothing had happened. It really did feel like back to old pandemic, Hurt business sort of thing. They were just their normal beastly selves. They looked great. Shelton just looks brilliant at the moment. He's the shining light. Sorry, Bobby Lashley, but Shelton's overshadowing you at the moment because, like, we expect it from Bobby to see what feels like an old Shelton, but with muscles and like strength, and to the point where he's just able to throw people around. It just feels really good. And then Shelton picked up the win by pinning Quen, and basically that you've got the announcement. You got it more confirmed on Collision, but this tonight will be the Hurt Syndicate versus Private Party for the tag titles. Sorry, Private Party. I'm sorry. Your titles are going because they are one of the best things right now. The Hurt Syndicate. They are absolutely brilliant right now. Also announced for tonight is Cope, that man. So that's going to be a running joke from now on. I'm just not going to address the fact that I don't know who Cope is. Of course I know who Cope is. Versus Pac, which will be a great match. And then it was announced that Ricochet versus Swerve Strickland would be, at the time, 3 weeks' time. At this point, 2 weeks' time. Thanks for confusing me with really extended timings of your matches and match graphics, AEW. Thank you very much. I honestly, reading my notes, I forget how strong this Dynamite is. This is a paper, like, it really, like, AEW pulled it out the bag this week. Jeff Jarrett comes out, and you're thinking, right, we're going to get an advancement here of the MJF storyline. And you're waiting for Jarrett to say anything. He's immediately cut off by MJF. We're getting straight into it. No hesitation whatsoever. MJF, half of my notes is just a couple of quotes, to be honest. But my favorite one is MJF to turn around to Jeff Jarrett and going, Jeff Jarrett is what you see before a wrestling company dies.
Jesus.
Oh, it was like, and that was in the first minute. At that point, you knew it was going to be brutal. I was like, whatever's said between these two is going to be brutal. It's brilliant. MJF brings up the fact that Jeff Jarrett is an alcoholic.
Yep.
He then brings up Karen Jarrett.
Yep.
He hints at affairs that Karen Jarrett has supposedly had.
Yep.
And this, Jeff Jarrett hadn't said a word yet.
Yeah.
But you could just tell that like these two seem to really like working together. You can just tell. They've wanted to do this for a while. I just get that vibe that these two have wanted to go at it in a good way, not in a shoot way. Jeff Jarrett says that the fans have brought out the best in him at the Owen Hart Cup last year. Again, I think he's a hot prospect to possibly win it this year. And then he brings up the parents of MJF. And like, I can't remember the specifics, but it's like to do with his mom being a hooker and all of this, like, and it just goes on and on. And you're just there like, that was the moment. Like initially, you're thinking, "Oh, MJF's like might have gone off script here, and gone in on Jarrett more than he should." No. Jarrett gave it straight back the same amount, and it was just like a tennis match. It was like watching two people who clearly are brilliant on the mic, clearly don't care what is said about them and what is said about their families. They just let them sound. It's that classic. If you've seen the Godzilla versus Kong, and you've got that moment where it's like let them fight. That is exactly what Tony Khan did. He let these two fight verbally. Then Jarrett says that MJF is scared to go on top at the top again. That's why he's been mulling around. That's why he's bothering Jeff Jarrett now. It's because he's scared to go back to the top because he's worried he'll be a one-hit wonder. The crowd start chanting one-hit wonder. It's glorious. It just plays on all the insecurities MJF's got, his character has, and it just plays off of it brilliantly. And my next note is literally this feud is great, and it's been like 2 weeks. Just the passion from MJF shouting, like spit coming out of his mouth. You just really could feel it. And he's like, I don't want to win the AEW World Championship again. I need to win it. Again, almost proving what Jeff Jarrett had been saying. He needs it to prove he's not a one-hit wonder, and he knows it. MJF then brings up Owen Hart and basically says, basically get over your dead friend. Is the short of what he said. Like, stop playing off your dead friend's legacy.
Yep.
He's not here anymore, and you shouldn't be either, type ordeal. Obviously, not Jeff Jarrett should be dead, as in like he shouldn't be wrestling anymore, just to clarify that point. And that leads to a brawl. Jarrett goes absolutely ballistic, and then Karen Jarrett comes down. MJF uses Karen as a shield and runs away, scrambles. Wherever this feud is going, inject it into my veins. This is what I love about wrestling, is when two people clearly don't care and just let themselves go at it. We saw it with Punk and MJF. We're seeing it now. Just two people who don't care what's said about each other. Let's make this feud great. And they do exactly that. Absolutely brilliant. Then we've got Christian Cage versus Hook, which, to be honest, the only reason this match matters is for the ending. It was all built on the fact that Christian Cage beat up Taz. Taz went for surgery, but they played it off as if Cage beat up Taz. And Hook was very, very angry. So Hook attacked Cage before the match. But Cage became quite dominant because the patriarchy kept interfering, just slowly but surely, just little grab of the foot here, a little distraction here, and that's every time Cage got on top. Really well told story. I've just put Hook tried to break Cage's arm, because at one stage it legitimately looked like that was about to happen. He had the arm on the steps. I don't know what he was going to do, but whatever it was, legitimately would have broken the arm if he didn't move out of the way. Luckily, he did move out of the way and picked up Hook and just slammed him onto the steps back first, almost like Drew McIntyre style from the Sal match, for people who want a visual of that. And then you had Cage fully on top. You had Frog Splash, went up again. Taz was like on commentary being like, no, Frog Splash. Then Spear, kick out. Hook looked so strong, as he always does, but it was a bit more actual back and forth, which we're starting to see from Hook matches rather than the dominance that we've seen in the past.
Yep.
And then Hook locks in the Red Room, and then he's pulling on Cage. Patriarchy DQ, and at this point, I'm thinking, for flip's sake, like, we've gone through all of that to just have the patriarchy interfere, end in DQ. What was the point? Taz then gets off the commentary desk, and you're like, okay, here we go. And then Samoa Joe's music hits. Samoa Joe's back, and I knew it was coming because I watched it the next day, saw on Twitter everything that had come out that Samoa Joe was back. I still pops out of my mind. Samoa Joe just looked like a beast. He always does. And yeah, he ran in to help, and there we got it. We're going to have Samoa Joe in this sort of feud with the patriarchy. Samoa Joe is back, obviously former AEW World Champion. It's very good to see Samoa Joe back, obviously back from recording Twisted Metal.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a shame he has to go away, but it always feels good when he comes back. I can tell you that for certain. Then we had an Undisputed Kingdom promo, which, to be honest, don't mention a lot of like the mid-match promos, but in this one they mentioned that they want gold this year. They kind of mentioned that whether that's single title, tag team title, they are going to win gold this year, which I think is true. I do think they are going to win gold. I just don't know what yet. Then we go backstage, and Jeff Jarrett is having a interview backstage. Dustin Rhodes comes into shot and goes, "I believe. Don't let this kid run at you and say all these things about you. We are the last of our kind. We need to stick together. We need to believe in each other. We're going to basically leave the business soon. Let's go out on a high type thing." Kind of pep talking Jarrett.
Yeah.
To be honest, I feel like that's going to be the theme of a lot of this year, is the slow build to Jarrett having these big matches and not winning and not winning and not winning, and then winning the Owen Hart Cup. I feel like that's just where it's going. And I don't care if it's predictable. Do it, because the story's right there. And he doesn't have to win the world title, but I feel like you could easily tell the story of him having that shot, losing the world championship shot, and then him putting his career on the line as the last chance of I've won one big match, and that was to get this opportunity. I then wasted that opportunity. One more. Give me one more. I don't know who the champion would be at the time. I feel like I almost feel like it would be poetic if he went back to MJF. Based off of all this story, because I feel like Darby's going to beat Moxley, and I feel like for Jarrett to have that story, I feel like it has to be a heel. So I feel like Darby then has to lose it. Who to? Who knows? But that's where I think it's going. And then we get to the Casino Gauntlet match. I love these matches. I mentioned it last week. I'll mention it again. These matches are cool. This is one of the best new concepts to come out. I love it. I saw it live once, and I want to see it live every single week. This is brilliant. This just showed that they had a really stacked women's division. Just, you had the likes of Chris Statlander started, Jamie Hayter was straight out afterwards. You then had Megan Payne from Stardom, which was really fun. You have Mariah May on commentary, who's obviously the AEW Women's Champion. My favorite quote of Mariah May's, she was brilliant, by the way, on commentary. I mentioned that later on. Yeah, good on comms. She is brilliant, but she mentions for Megan Payne, she plays it off really well. Like, she shouldn't be in this. Like, why have we got someone not in the company in this? Like, Megan came into Stardom and I left it for a good reason. Like, almost putting over, I wanted to avoid her. And then the quote of the show was, "She doesn't even have a graphic. Why is she here?" Which is just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Julia Hart was also in the match. Mariah May was just brilliant at putting over the talent for how young Mariah May is. The one thing someone like Jericho gets praised a lot for when he's on commentary is he stays in character but puts over the talent that are in the ring and makes it seem like they're all viable threats to whatever's going on. She made everyone in that match feel like a threat to her title, possibly bar one person. But there's a good reason for that, and that is Harley Cameron comes in very late on, and Mariah May just beat Harley Cameron on the last show, so said, "I've beaten her once, I can beat her again." And then went, "However, if she wins this match, I'm facing her in Australia in front of her family," and that could change things. She again somehow found a way to make it. I might have beaten her just literally last week, but really, really, I cannot praise Mariah May enough for what she did. Willow Nightingale then enters. Then Tony Storm enters. We know where this is going. And I just put here, Tony being a rookie is a hilarious gimmick. Like, whoever came up with it, whether it was Tony or whether it wasn't Tony, whoever it is deserves a raise and a medal, because her just playing it off as if like I've never been in the ring with any of these people. Like she was even doing like at one point she was just doing snapmare and then like hitting them around the head like snapmare and like kick, and she just kept doing snapmares to everyone. And commentary were like, this is because like this is the one move she learned really early on, and this is the one that she puts over. And she again, she was putting it over like, you know, this is the one, like it's the move she knows she can hit.
Mm-hmm.
So she just kept doing it. It was literally like watching someone who is new in the ring and only knows a few moves while also being as good as Tony Storm is. It's so mind-bending in the best way possible.
Mm-hmm.
Then Harley Cameron enters, and basically the match ends when Julia Hart goes to miss someone, ends up missing Harley Cameron. Tony rolls up Julia Hart. 1, 2, 3. Tony Storm wins. We're getting the rematch and we're getting it in Australia, which we all know we wanted. And Mariah May's, again, on comms was just like, I'm really happy for Tony. We've never met before. Like, you can clearly tell that Mariah May's sort of playing off the fact of like, almost like Tony's delusions. Like, Tony's currently delusional that she is new and is completely wiped from her memory what has happened. And it feels like Mariah May's playing off for it. Like, I don't know her. You know, I can't wait to face this rookie. Almost, again, just playing into the delusion, hoping almost she doesn't remember. There is a face-to-face happening this week with the two of them, and I feel like that could be where we start to see Tony remember. And I feel like that's just going to be the build to Grand Slam. It's just Tony slowly remembering week to week what Mariah May did until the actual show where we get whatever version of Tony who eventually wins the title because she's winning it back. But another casino gauntlet that was just brilliant. Absolutely loved the concept. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Then the main event. AEW World Championship match. Jon Moxley, Powerhouse Hobbs, who was my wrestler of the week last week, and it starts off like very Shield-esque of all of the Death Riders surrounding the ring, like basically to distract Hobbs before Moxley then goes after him. They then fight in the crowd before Hobbs gets back to his dominant self. Moxley's ear is bleeding more than I've seen anyone's ear bleed. I didn't know ears could bleed like that. There is so much blood. And I don't even know how it happened, but there is so much blood. You can tell it's an accident. It's insane. Shafir then hits Hobbs. More and more blood just coming out of Jon Moxley. There's just pools of blood around the ring. Just so many pools of it. There's a lot of interference. You had Yuta hit Hobbs. I'm pretty sure you had Pac possibly hit Hobbs at one point. He gets hit with the briefcase. He then kicks out. Paradigm shift, kicks out. And then Moxley just chokes out Hobbs. Hobbs looked brilliant again. And Mox gets the win because Hobbs can no longer compete. But Hobbs looked brilliant, incredibly strong, really well put over, made him look like a beast. It took so much interference for Moxley to win. It was just, again, brilliant. That's the theme of this Dynamite episode. There's a lot of good stuff on it. Then there's a post-match beatdown where they basically attack the knee of Powerhouse Hobbs, the surgically repaired knee, and they wrap a chair around and then bang. They break the knee. They take and then right. I'm starting my agenda now. This is the podcast agenda.
Yep.
Right, and all members of the podcast are involved. Right.
Oh God.
Right. Cope is a fraud. Right. He's an absolute fraud because he comes out for the save after Powerhouse Hobbs has been like demolished with the chair and had his knee completely ruined by the Death Riders. Right, comes out way too late, like fraud watch.
Right, okay.
And
Bragster's Fraud Watch, a new segment every week.
Bragster's Fraud Watch. Cope is a fraud. He comes out for the save after Hobbs has already been absolutely demolished by the Death Riders. Doesn't once help him during the match, or doesn't even help him in the post-match breakdown. He waits for Hobbs to be unable to move and then comes out for the save. Fraud.
He had to get parking. He had to get a valet to take the car for him. He was struggling backstage to get through.
Fraud.
I feel that's harsh on Cope.
However, brilliant episode. It just, like, I've said it from start to finish, but there wasn't a segment where I was like, okay, this is the piss break, or, you know, I can't not watch this. You know, possibly the one you could possibly say that to is maybe the Hurt Syndicate, but again, it was their debut match, so you can't really there. And then the Cage Hook match, but Samoa Joe returned. Like, something happened in every segment which mattered, and that is what AEW is at its best. And yeah, this show was just brilliant from top to bottom. Really, really enjoyed it.
Well, if you couldn't tell, Bragster enjoyed AEW Dynamite this week. The enthusiasm was absolutely glowing there, and yeah, well, I'm glad to see that Dynamite seems to be firing on all cylinders again. Again, a couple more weeks like this, and maybe, who knows, I might start to watch it again.
But that's it. Like, I think that's the big one. It's all about consistency, and you know, they've got the stars to do it.
Yeah,
they've just got to keep going at this rate. Part of the reason why AEW did so well is they can put on TV really good matches that you maybe wouldn't usually see in, you know, in WWE they'd save for a pay-per-view because the roster is so good.
Yeah.
Right now they're doing exactly that.
Yeah. That's fair enough. Okay. Well, that's that for this week's Dynamite. So with that being said, let's take a look into this week's SmackDown. Right then. So we'll go into this week's SmackDown. We've got Rey Mysterio opening the show, reminiscing in his hometown, declaring for the Rumble, and then also reminiscing about the 2006 Rumble, how he started first, lasted over an hour, and won the Rumble, of course, the classic 2006 Rumble that we all love and adore. You then have Kevin Owens come out in the middle of said promo, saying that he respects Rey, probably respects Rey more than anybody else on the roster in WWE at the moment, and that basically, because of his abilities, Kevin Owens has been able to carry out some of his dreams in WWE. He's WrestleMania main evented, fighting Stone Cold and tagging with his then best friend Sami Zayn against the Usos to win the tag team titles, to name but a few things that KO has done over his time in WWE. He then wants Rey to win the Rumble so then he can go on and challenge KO for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania as well. To which then Rey says, that's all well and good, that sounds great. There's just one problem. You're not the champ. Cody's the champ. So if I win, I will challenge Cody. Unless you win the belt, then I'll challenge you. To which then KO gets very angry, like KO does in his classic angry style. And a brawl ensues. And basically from that point, it gets confirmed that we will see KO versus Rey Mysterio on SmackDown. So instead of it building to a potential WrestleMania main event, we get it on SmackDown a few short moments later. But we'll get on to that match in a little bit.
I love Owens' delusion. It's hilarious.
Yeah, if there's one thing, I mean, Owens does a lot right all the time for me. But if there's one thing he does better, I would say in his promos, it's the angry delusion. Like when he was having, like, one of my favorite periods of KO when he has this delusion is when he's trying to prove that Ezekiel was Elias and he's doing the lie detector test and he's just absolutely losing his mind. KO, comedic timing, anger, being a heel, being a face, everything KO does is gold to me. So yeah, it was a brilliant segment once again, and he has another one coming up in Raw as well, which we'll talk about in a bit.
And one of my favorite lines is, "Do you have a streak of blonde hair under that mask?
Yes,
you've been infected by Cody Rhodes." It was what it just. I don't even. It's just hilarious. It just, as you said, the comedy that man just brings out naturally is just brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And then next up, you had a tag match with Nia Jax and Candice LeRae taking on Bianca and Naomi. There was a little bit of a pre-match segment with Bianca and Naomi where they were talking about what happened last week in the Fatal 4-Way. All seemed to be good, though. There wasn't much issues. Bianca explaining it wasn't my fault what happened because Candice had my hair. So Naomi then playfully says, well, I think you should tie it up. So Bianca then proceeds to tie it up, though it didn't last very long. I think it was like 2 moves into the match and it was basically back out and that was it. So who knows if that was the plan? Probably wasn't, but hey, it didn't really make a big difference. You then had Bianca and Naomi going over, so they won the tag team match. Again, it was an okay match, nothing to write home about, but it was your typical standard SmackDown tag team match, really. And then you had an interview segment with Bayley and Byron hyping up the title match that Bayley had against Tiffany. Again, Bayley really doing a great job of playing off the history and obviously building up why she needs to win the title and what she's going after Tiffany for. So yeah, a good hype up segment for that. You then moved on to Chelsea Green's backstage segment, which again, I always enjoy a good Chelsea Green and Pippin, or Piper Niven, sorry. Pippin from Lord of the Rings just suddenly walks in. It's just like, where's Frodo? Where's Merry? What's going on? Oh, God, my pronunciations are terrible this week. Which basically ends up with, I think it was B-Fab and Mitchin talking about how Mitchin was so close to win the US title. Pippin then walks in. Pippin? There we go again. Piper then walks in again. Oh, dear God. Piper then walks in again saying there's no immediate threats here. You can come in to Chelsea. Again, acting like I mentioned last week as the security for Chelsea's US title reign. And then basically there's a bit of back and forth and it ends up in B-Fab taking on Piper later on in the night. So yeah, again, fantastic segment there as always. One thing I will say about it is that what everyone seems to be doing in SmackDown is basically saying, if I want something, I'm going strict to Nick Aldis and getting a match. That seems to be a line that's almost coded into every single promo in SmackDown recently, and I just would like them to move away so that it's not like everyone's going crying to Nick Aldis to get a match, basically. But hey-ho, that's a little bit of a bugbear for me. So then after that, you had Jimmy Uso versus Carmelo Hayes. And for me, I thought this was building up to be quite a nice little match. Started off a little bit slow, like most WWE matches do. Take a little while to build up when they have time on their side. But by the end, I thought we were getting into quite a nice little singles match and maybe something we can revisit down the line. Unfortunately, much like LA Knight and Shinsuke Nakamura the week before, we had an intrusion at the end, with Jacob Fatu and Tama Tonga breaking in at the end and attacking Jimmy Uso, laying him out flat, and basically leaving him to try and retain his own option of his own volition. One thing I did like about the ending was how Carmelo came up to the two of them and was like, good job, boys, we're on the same team, aren't we? This is going well. And they just went, who are you, pal? I just laid him out, and that was the end of Carmelo's segment of the week. So a nice little match there. You then have Solo come out, as we were waiting to see what Solo had to say, because he's just had the big loss against Roman a few weeks ago. Not really seen him since then. And last week there was sort of a big focus and attention on Jacob Fatu. So who knows what Solo was thinking at this point? Was there going to be another breakup of that bloodline or that version of the bloodline? Was Solo going to announce he was after another title? We got none of those things. He basically turned up, picked up the mic, got booed out the building, put the mic down, put his jacket over his shoulder, and walked away. And that was it from Solo. We didn't see anything else. What that means, time will only tell. After that, though, very interestingly, Jacob Fatu picked up the mic and started talking of his own accord, basically telling everyone, I don't really give a damn what you think. I'm going to do my thing. And basically, if you think that I'm nuts now, well, I haven't really got started yet, so let's see what comes next. And to be honest, again, like everything Jacob Fatu related that I mentioned before, he looked great. He looked like a star in the making. And I think, like I said last week, this is very much the beginning of his push, I think. And we're, like he said, we're only just getting started.
Yeah.
Cue the megastar LA Knight jumping both of them very bravely, doing it solo as well, may I add.
Unintended.
Yeah, unintended. And eventually gets overpowered, but then we have the return of Braun Strowman coming out to much applause and much cheers from the crowd. And then you had a pretty cool moment in Fatu and Braun circling each other. And again, you're thinking, well, you know how nuts Fatu is. Braun's also not exactly the most straightforward guy himself and is a little bit unhinged, so this could be something we would quite like to see. Well, unfortunately, Tama Tonga pulled out Fatu, and we went from there, basically. And we left it there, though it was confirmed later on that at Saturday night's main event, which again is another show I'm going to have to watch this week, we're going to see Jacob Fatu and Braun Strowman, which again, I'm actually quite looking forward to see what Fatu does in a singles match properly on pay-per-view, I guess, or a special event.
Yeah, special event. Yeah,
on a special Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting. How should I put? I'm not expecting that match to end. I reckon there could be some shenanigans where they end up going backstage and it just ends up in a big brawl.
They end up in a big truck and they're just getting taken away by whatever.
I think that's like how it's going to end, and then I think that could probably spill into the Rumble, where that's how like you think, okay, Bloodline are dominant. How are they going to get Fatu out? Braun's music hits. And then they take each other out. I think that could be a feud that sort of goes on for a little bit longer. I think that's my sort of feelings at the moment. I could be surprised, and they could just go with the Fatu win, but I think that they might just want to bubble it over a bit more, and add a bit more heat to this before they pay it off.
Yeah, I think it's very short term, the Strowman and Fatu. I think the next piece after Strowman is LA Knight, but I think you could see that little bit of interaction with Strowman and Fatu at the Rumble, where maybe Strowman starts out and then the Bloodline come in and get rid of Strowman, and then LA comes in and knocks out Fatu maybe, and that's how you build off that to go into the next thing. But yeah, I thought it was a great segment overall. Didn't really have any complaints in terms of the match that preceded it with Jimmy and Carmelo, and then it nicely linking into LA Knight coming in and then building to Jacob, Fatu, and Strowman coming in. So then after that, you had a tag match between Motor City Machine Gun and Los Garza, very much billed by commentary as sort of the number one contenders match, although not necessarily labelled that on any of the graphics or anything, but they both won last week going into this one, so setting up whoever wins here will probably take on DIY in the very near future. And again, some great tag moves again from Motor City Machine Gun. Really liked what they did. I mean, smooth as butter, as I always say. And yeah, again, a great addition to the tag team ever since they've been in over the past couple of months, and continue to really be a standout match I've seen since I've watched SmackDown again consecutively over the past couple of months. They've always been a highlight to me. So them being involved and being sort of the leaders, I would say, in this tag team development again on SmackDown is a great thing to see. And then you get Pretty Deadly come out and pretty much cost Los Garza, and then there's a bit of a kerfuffle backstage with them and DIY. Nothing really happens of that though, but then Apollo Crews turns up and again says, I told you things were going to go wrong if you were doing this, and then Apollo Crews gets beaten up. So he's probably going to get a tag partner later on down the line, but we'll see who that ends up being. So yeah, So from there, you then had Aldis talking to KO and Cody at different segments. I put this both together because obviously it links to the same. Basically talking about there being an amendum to the contract for the ladder match at Royal Rumble. Cody says in the first segment, I ain't signing it unless he signs it. KO then says, well, I sure as hell ain't signing it unless he signs it. So basically, neither are going to sign it until the other does. So, bit of a stalemate.
Bit of a stalemate. Oh, what's on Saturday?
Yeah. How do we...
Is it by any chance a contract signing?
Yes,
anyway?
there is. Yes.
Oh, so it's almost like they didn't sign the contracts because... Oh, they've got a contract signing.
Yes, they do. So, more on that later.
Sarcasm.
More on that later. I know. I guessed. And then you had Niven versus B-Fab. Again, not the greatest match, in all honesty. I think Niven did the best that she could with it. Not to say that B-Fab was bad or anything, but I just think they didn't necessarily gel that well together. And Piper ended up getting the win. And that was all she wrote for that sort of little mini segment for the US Championship on the women's side. Next up, then, you had Rey Mysterio and KO. Again, my first note on this is KO is a national treasure that needs to be protected at all costs. Gets the win and goes to give Rey the pile driver, and Cody comes out for a brawl, as he would do. It then cuts to backstage afterwards with Cody and Aldis, and then going on what you were mentioning before, they're going to both relinquish the titles at Saturday night's main event, and Shawn Michaels is going to be there to watch over and make sure everything goes according to plan, which obviously means it will not go according to plan, and KO will probably nick off with both belts, and we'll see what happens from there, basically.
Also, my only issue with this is if they relinquish the belts, does that mean Cody becomes a 2-time champion?
No, I think it's in the sense
that is ridiculous.
No, I understand. I understand what you're saying. I think it's more the case of you have to give us the belts to put them up there.
Yeah, so that's what I'm hoping. Look, usually I wouldn't ask that question, but we know what WWE are like with stat padding, and they will do it if they can. So
I don't think they will. I think if this was the Vince era, it probably would be, but I don't think they will. I think it'll just be a case of it's just
okay because Owen's winning anyway. So.
Oh, you're adamant that's happening, aren't you?
I'm not. I'm wishing it into existence.
Oh, right, okay.
Kevin Owens deserves it.
And to be fair, if KO did win it, it would prove my point right that I said to you last year, obviously way before the podcast even existed, and I said Cody would drop the belt before Mania. So that's a double for me because it means A, we get KO with the belt, and 2, it means I'm right and you were wrong. So it's a double win for me. Anyway, so confirmed that Shawn Michaels will be there for Saturday night's main event. It then also gets confirmed that Strowman and Fatu will fight, like we mentioned before. And then we had a video package. Who could it be? Well, it was pretty obvious from early on, to be honest. It was Charlotte Flair. She's back. Almost doing like they did with Cody when they basically had Cody return from injury and say, I'm here. And we were like, we know. And then he was like, I'm just going to be at the Rumble. See you there, guys. Although Charlotte obviously didn't have that. It was just a promo. And she was living the luxurious lifestyle that only a Flair could live. And enjoying life, basically. So, yeah, not much else going on there. And then we got to the main event of SmackDown, and it was Bayley versus Tiffany. And again, it was a good back and forth match. I felt for a main event, it was good. I felt it was probably my match of the night, I would say, because again, there was a couple of bits with Rey and KO where they kind of stumbled a little bit over the moves. There was a couple of times where KO had to go over the rope, and it didn't quite go as they planned. Whilst Bayley's and Tiffany's was a bit smoother and a better match overall. And again, it was a title match, so probably the best thing for them is for the title match to be the best match on the card, and it certainly lived up to expectations. There's a bit of back and forth between Bayley and Roxanne Perez, which was interesting to see. Potentially something to watch out for in the Rumble, and maybe a feud going ahead. We'll wait and see. And yeah, it was a good overall match. in terms of the SmackDown overall, I did think it wasn't as good as last week's, but I still think it developed enough stories going forward, and you got a few more layers on characters and promos and stuff like that. So yeah, we'll see where it goes from here. Obviously, we've got another SmackDown to go before Saturday night's main event, so we'll see if that has any impact on it from there. And yeah, it was overall a good match for the title. I did have a couple of questions on the end of it in terms of Tiffy and Tiffy time, as she keeps doing that before every other move. She keeps doing that. Who do you think challenges Tiffy next? Because obviously you've got a big challenger in Bayley done and dusted. She's out now. Who do you think comes after Tiffy next?
Next or at Mania?
Next.
Okay. Next on the list. That's a tougher question. I think that SmackDown Women's Division is slim. It's like, especially with Nia doing some stuff over on Raw, and with obviously Bayley as
signed,
him wink wink, signing with Raw, for later on. I know who I think it should be, and I think it'd be a really cool story, which is, I think they should give it to Candice. I think Candice should be the next opponent. I think that ties in nicely with the feud that's been going on. They can then revisit Nia straight after, as well, and sort of tie up that feud if they want to tie it up. But I think Candice is like the slight loose end. It also gives Candice like a big match, which we all know Candice deserves. I think it sort of makes the most sense of someone who is not on the same level as Bayley, but has that story as to why they're facing Tiffany, and sort of can be an easy win for Tiffany on the road to WrestleMania, while also still being a fun match.
Yeah, that's fair. I had some notes. In terms of next, I didn't really have. I don't think there's necessary. Like I like the idea of Candice. That does appeal to me, and it'd be interesting to see Candice actually get given a proper spot as well.
She's great.
She is very underutilized, and when she got given the chance to go at NXT, she was brilliant. I also think that there is potential here for a long line of people coming, because I know there's been a few movements, like we've mentioned Bayley and Nia probably going over to Raw at the minute, but I also think you've got the likes of Liv could probably go over to SmackDown. If we've mentioned that Dom may go over to SmackDown at some point, as theorized, Liv could potentially come with him, and that might be a challenger for Tiffany to deal with. I also think that you've got, Charlotte Flair kind of writes itself, really, her coming back. She always comes back into a title picture. May not necessarily be the title she wants, but she usually comes back into a title picture. Her against Tiffy kind of writes itself, I think, in terms of the Queen versus the up-and-comer who's really taking Charlotte's place, really, as the go-to for matches. I also, again, I mentioned it before that I would bring her back into conversation later, but I think you could do Jordynne Grace at Mania. I actually think... Look, it's a big shout, right? But I think WWE are so high up on Jordynne Grace. After what she did last year at the Rumble, there was clearly conversations from there of saying, we want you in WWE from there.
Yeah.
She's held offside, obviously not. She didn't sign any contracts with TNA like she could have done. She could have really capitalized on that and got herself a better contract. I do think that Grace could get a big spot. I think there's another position that she might get into if she's put on the main roster, and I think she might be the one that goes for the US belt and gets it off Chelsea.
I like that.
Because I think that you have that sort of... Chelsea's sort of running away from people, and then you've got Jordan being the one like, right, come here, right, I'm taking it off you, and gives the US belt a nice long run after Chelsea's initial start with it. But I do think there is a potential that if you really want Grace to start off hot, take down Tiffy at Mania basically and bring it down a level, which would be great to see. But
Oh, I'd love it.
I do think SmackDown. I know it seems like now there's not a lot there, but I think there are pieces of the puzzle that are coming and that we'll see in the near future. But yeah,
I think for me the Mania match. That's why I asked, and then you when I mentioned her is Charlotte Flair.
Yeah.
I think it writes itself. I think that people are overlooking. I'm seeing a lot of predicting Mania cards, and no one's saying Charlotte and Tiffy. And that's because of some reports coming out. Yes, they're lying to you. They are like, it's quite clear they're dropping some reports that are just factually incorrect. We just don't know which ones they are. But I think that Charlotte and Tiffy is the move. I think there's a real good chance that Charlotte wins the Rumble, and people are really underestimating that there's a really good chance that Charlotte wins the Rumble. But I think, as you said, it writes itself.
Yeah.
Like, Tiffy literally took the place that Charlotte Flair had, and after the promo package, the character of Tiffy and the character of Charlotte align more than ever before. I think that's your Mania match.
And I think there. it's as much as she's been built over the past year, it would make Tiffany if she beat Charlotte as well.
Oh yeah.
And I know there's a big return for Charlotte, and usually the big returns get the titles in the end if it's been a very long layoff. But I think you gain way more getting Tiffany that win over Charlotte and saying, look, I've got this title. I've beaten the best the women's wrestler we've ever had.
Yeah.
Records for Charlotte speak themselves. Like, I think there's so much you can get out of that. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see because, again, a lot of the picture for WrestleMania is still not put together. Very little, of course, heading into the Rumble, and I think after the Rumble, we'll probably have a much better idea of where things are going. But yeah, that was SmackDown. So with that, let's take a look into Collision. Had to think a little bit there about what the next show was, but I figured it out before I paused too long. Let's look at Collision.
Oh, Collision. I ran out of pages of notes for Collision. Right?
Is that good or bad?
Oh, it's mainly good. Mainly good.
Okay.
Because that page right there is for one match. Right? Yeah.
Okay.
One, because it was the opening match between Christopher Daniels and Hangman Adam Page in a Texas death match. This was brutal. AEW know how to do one thing and one thing. I was going to say one thing only, but that's harsh. They know how to do one thing very, 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 very well, and that is no DQ deathmatch style wrestling. They never miss a beat. Hangman also doesn't miss a beat. We saw that with Swerve. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, he had one with Brody King as well, and that one was very, very good. So Hangman doesn't miss a beat, and this is Christopher Daniels' swan song, and it really felt like it. I'll mention it again later in more detail, but they really should have made a big deal out of this being Daniels' last match, because it's so obvious by the end of it that it is. Because
he said he did. I think there was a report that came out today that basically he said he didn't want it to be a big pomp and circumstance. He just wanted to have the match and that be it. He didn't want the.
I respect that massively. That just shows how Christopher Daniels is such a professional. Is he wanted that entire match to be about Hangman and not to be about him, and it really was. But my God, to a wrestling fan, it felt like a swan song, and that is the best compliment I can have to this match. It was initially a slow start, but the moment that basically Hangman was in control, very arrogant, very cocky, and then Christopher Daniels came back a little bit and got a bit of offense in, and that seemed to just annoy Hangman. To the point then they get to the rest of the notes. The majority of this was taken by Christopher Daniels. He gets a chair shot to the head, and not the nice way, the sharp edge way. straight to the forehead within. Yeah. And then Hangman rolls him into the ring, and you're thinking, okay, that's a good start. Let's get to the first weapon in. Hangman then grabs from underneath the ring barbed wire handcuffs of some sort of like style. Just grabs these like tiny little handcuffs. Well, I say handcuffs, they're like barbed wire tied. It's weird, but they're tied at either end. And then he just pushes it into Daniels' face and goes, blood everywhere. We are like 5 minutes into the match, and the match is full of blood. And you would think the match has got to end soon. He's bleeding a lot. It goes on like another 10-15 more minutes. So he cuts the top of the head, blood literally everywhere. Then and then Daniels tries to fight back, and then Hangman reverses it, goes backwards, puts the barbed wire around the mouth of Daniels, and goes like that again. And rubs it from side to side, cutting obviously the mouth. Daniels then hits the floor, and then you're thinking, okay, that's the end of the barbed wire. No! Whips him with the barbed wire on the back, and Daniels is pretty much dying. Then you're thinking, okay, then he chucks that out of the ring, and you're thinking, that's the end of the barbed wire. No! Hangman grabs more barbed wire, ties it around his arm, and just starts trying to weddy him in the face. And it doesn't end. And you've got
the most extensive plastic surgery you've seen in a wrestling match ever before.
It's ridiculous. This match felt like something out of Saw at times. Then you had Hangman set up 2 chairs side by side, power bombs Daniels through the middle of both of them. Again, that was just brutal. I literally wrote going out in style.
Yeah.
Right? And to clarify again, I wrote going out in style up here on the notes. There's a lot more to go.
For listeners of the podcast, it was about a third of the way up the page.
Yeah, it wasn't far down. Then we got Daniels goes head first into the chair in the corner. So he just gets chucked into the corner head first, blood obviously everywhere. Then Daniels then obviously hits head first into the chair, rolls out the ring onto a magical table that's just randomly appeared. And then Hangman climbs the top rope and basically coup de grace him. It stomps through Daniels through the table. The table doesn't break very nicely, so it's going to have hurt more than most tables would. And at that point, you're thinking Daniels is battered. This has got to be, this has got to be close to the end now. No, because Hangman Adam Page grabs a barbed wire table.
I think if I was Daniels, I'd be like, Hangman, time out. Is this necessary? Is this necessary? Do we need... Yeah? Okay, let's keep going.
It's absolutely insane. And then you have them climb onto the top rope. Christopher Daniels manages to get around it. Uranagis Hangman through the barbed wire table. This is the first bit of offense Daniels has had
he's been saving his stamina up clearly for all the punishment.
A good 8 minutes. It was a while before we had any offense at all, bar an odd couple of hit strikes just to move the match on. There was nothing. It was a very, very dominant up to this point. Then you have the buckshot reversed into a submission, with Christopher Daniels trying to get him to tap out, and the crowd are going ballistic, going tap out, going mental. And then the good old trustworthy. What do you think Hangman Adam Page gets and uses to get out of the submission?
Barbed wire?
Barbed wire, correct. Congratulations.
I actually started to think about it like a serious question. I was like, hang on, I know where he's going with this now.
We grab some more barbed wire, bang around the face, like more just rubbing on the face to get more blood, as if we needed more blood. And then there's a bit of back and forth. Then there's another barbed wire. There's not another barbed wire table. It's the remnants of the old barbed wire table. Then get placed on Hangman after Hangman's just been hit with a wonderful moonsault by Christopher Daniels. Christopher Daniels goes, no, not good enough. Grabs like a large piece of the broken barbed wire table, places it on top of Hangman, barbed wire obviously downwards on Hangman, and then does another moonsault onto Hangman with barbed wire across the chest of Hangman Adam Page. Neither of these two like their bodies. Then at this point, for the Texas Death Match, it was a count of 10. For those that don't know how the match ends, it's to a count of 10, like a traditional last man standing match type ordeal. And Hangman
ordeal being the right word.
Did not move. Like 1, 2, 3, all the way 7, 8, and on 9, he shoots up. He does not move up to that point. You can see Daniels like going, I've won this. And then Hangman shoots up, stands on his own 2 feet, and then faces Daniels. And you can just see like the concern on Daniels' face as if he goes, that was all I've got. And you could sort of just see that. Like the storytelling in this match was just brilliant. And then Hangman gets the upper hand. Tombstone pile driver on the chair.
Of course. As if Tombstone pile driver wasn't enough. But yeah.
It's not enough. So the Tombstone pile driver on the chair. Deadeye on the chair. Buckshot. Lariat. And then...
Not on a chair.
I think the chair was still there, but not directly.
Barely hanging on at this point.
Yeah. And then Daniels just didn't move all the way to the count of 10, and you could just feel the crowd. Like the fact that he didn't move, there wasn't a bit of hope. Was just it was just, as I said, the most beautiful swan song for Christopher Daniels. It just, you could feel every count of that 10 count, the crowd knowing it was it. And knowing that's the last time they're probably going to watch him in the ring. And you could hear it on commentary, you could feel it, and it was so emotional for someone who's watched TNA since I was very young. To be honest, I probably watched more TNA than I did WWE when I was younger, back in mid 2000s, late 2000s. That was what I loved, and I grew up a lot on Christopher Daniels, so I sort of felt that. And I know I'm not the only wrestling fan that did that, and grew up watching Christopher Daniels, and you felt every single count up until that 10 hit, and you just then knew, and then even commentary put over, we were hoping this would be the start of Daniels having another full-time, time in the ring, for maybe another year. We get another year out of Christopher Daniels, but this is it. This could be it. And it was just the commentary again was just brilliant. And then basically Daniels is on the floor getting helped up by medical staff. Hangman leaves. No, he doesn't. He comes back, and then he hits the Angel's Wings, which is Christopher Daniels' finisher, on Daniels, and leaves him for dead.
Just to make sure the job is done.
Just to make sure the job is done, and again, just to prove that Hangman is just a bad guy now. He's right now there are no redeemable qualities about Hangman. This just proved it. As I said, beautiful swan song for a legend of the business who deserved it. And the fact that we got that much blood on free TV is absolutely insane. Like this felt like a pay-per-view match. I still feel like it probably should have been. I think that Daniels' last match not being on pay-per-view, even if Daniels didn't want to make a big deal out of it and make it feel like this is his last match, I still feel like this should have been a pay-per-view match. Because
And this was the opening match.
this is the opening match.
That's ridiculous.
This is how the show started.
That's ridiculous. It's insane.
I really thought this was going to be the end of the show. I really thought that this was going to be the closing of the show. Looking back, I lean on the side it probably should have been. Just personally, you know, I do believe it probably should have been. Again, I feel like AEW didn't make a big enough deal out of this. And as you said, like, Daniels didn't want it to be, but to not be the main event, to not be on a pay-per-view, you don't have to say it's his last match, but bloody hell, give him something. Because that was an incredible match that deserved every bit of flowers. Like, it was by far probably the best match of the entire week for me. You know, and again, a lot of that will be playing on the heartstrings. But you know, it to go out the way he did and it not be a main event or a pay-per-view match is absolutely crazy to me. Yeah, but what a career. Christopher Daniels going out on that high. Most people don't get to choose when they end their careers, and he not only chose to, he chose to die along the way. Next up, we had Toni Storm come out. Something light-hearted after everything that we dealt with. Very heartfelt promo, basically saying about her journey into the business. Again, calling herself a rookie, saying, you know, I've worked so hard to be here. My mom would be so proud. I now get to wrestle in front of my mom in Australia and all of this. You know, it's just Toni Storm being Toni Storm. It's brilliant. And she's really excited to meet Mariah May. She hasn't had the chance to meet Mariah May yet. You have, Tony. You have. But it's again, just comedically, it's just brilliant. And you have Tony Schiavone in the ring being like, Tony, don't you remember? Like, and she's like, but we've never met. And he was like, don't you remember? She went, no. She was like, this is actually a really good moment. Tony, it's Tony time, people. And then the crowd are going mental for Tony time. And it's just hilarious. Toni Storm is just a highlight and has been for a long time. I can't wait to see how that match comes about as the weeks go on. Just absolutely brilliant.
What, Tony and Schiavone?
No, the Mariah May. Okay. Tony Schiavone should stay on the desk for that one.
As he's getting an elbow through the desk from Tony.
Honestly, after seeing what Christopher Daniels just did, it wouldn't surprise me. Then we have the Hurt Syndicate and Private Party announced for Dynamite. Then we have Undisputed Kingdom versus Shane Taylor Promotions, which is Shane Taylor as the manager. And for those who don't know, and maybe haven't been keeping up, definitely not me, Lee Moriarty, Sean Dean, and Carly Bravo were the three that faced Undisputed Kingdom. It was a really good back and forth. The Undisputed Kingdom won. It was very, like, you know, just quick, fast-paced, like classic TV 10-minute match, like, you know, and there's nothing, that is not a criticism. I love classic TV matches. There's a place for them. This was the place for it. It progressed the story. Shane Taylor then went in the ring to issue a beatdown. Daniel Garcia then came out to confront Shane Taylor, and then the Undisputed Kingdom helped Danny Garcia basically take out Shane Taylor, and that's how the segment ended. Very much sort of indicating that Shane Taylor versus Daniel Garcia could be a move for the TNT title going forwards, which I love because I've been a fan of Shane Taylor for a while. So, you know, any Shane Taylor love for me, I will absolutely adore. Again, I seem to be mentioning this game a lot in this episode, but TEW, Shane Taylor was like my guy. He was my guy. In a faction ironically called the Kingdom. Which is ironic given the segment that just happened. But yeah, so And then I will link this in because this happens a little bit later on, but it basically they all link together. We then have a backstage segment where Daniel Garcia and Daddy Magic are backstage, and basically the Undisputed Kingdom come out and basically go, "It's a shame you don't have a third man. You know, we helped each other out just with Shane Taylor Promotions. It's a shame, you know, we don't have a third man here because, you know, this would be a great 3-on-3 match." And then it got announced that Cool Hand was coming back. And then you would end up with Danny Garcia, Cool Hand, and Daddy Magic versus the Undisputed Kingdom at the Homecoming show in Jacksonville, which would be really nice match, really friendly match. I presume Shane Taylor Promotions will probably get involved in some capacity, but it was really fun nonetheless. Then we have the Murder Machines, which, for those that haven't kept up with their name, is Lance Archer and Brian Cage. I nearly forgot their names.
Easy to say.
Really easy to say. The Murder Machines of Brian Cage and Lance Archer face Top Flight. And bear in mind that Top Flight are a credible team in AEW. You know, they are young, up-and-coming talents who are very, very good in the ring. And, you know, I was watching it going, this is very one-sided. I literally said, felt one-sided. This feels one-sided. Then the momentum shifted, and I wrote that down. I was like, momentum has shifted. This is now going to develop. No, it was still one-sided. It was basically a glorified squash match, which was very much a surprise. But again, sometimes a squash match out of nowhere can actually do a lot of good, and it does because it puts the Murder Machines over. Till they probably eventually face Ospreay and Omega and get battered. Let's be honest. Then Action Andretti and Lio Rush come out and they ambushed the Top Flight. So then you've got a mini little feud going on there. Probably more of a Collision feud than a Dynamite feud. But, you know, it's some nice developments in the tag division. Then you get a quick Learning Tree promo. We all love the Learning Tree. And basically, Jericho plays off of the fact that him and Mox have a lot of history. There's a big 12-man tag that involves them tagging later on. And he's like, Mox might not trust me, but he should trust me. And they were like, well, why should he trust you? And then he was like, you'll find out why. I'm going to prove why soon enough. At that point, I wrote down, someone's getting attacked from that 12-man tag. That 12-man tag is about to be turned into an 11-man tag and about to be turned to 6-on-5. Connor was right again. Then we had what's been bubbling over for a while, the full implosion of the Acclaimed. This was it. This was the moment that's sort of been building. Max Caster comes out basically saying, I'm the best. Me and Bowens need to sort this out, right? We need to sort out what's going on between us. We're a great tag team. What's going on? And then basically he accuses Bowens of being arrogant and not admitting that Max Caster is better than him. Again, the irony in that statement's brilliant. Yep. What was really played well on commentary, I can't speak. What was played well on commentary was the fact that Max Caster came out and didn't do a rap. It was just no entrance music. He was already in the ring, very serious, so you knew it was serious from the off. And it was played off very well, where you sort of got the vibe of this is it, and then it was it. Spoilers, but that's why we're going through it. Then Max Caster basically tells Bowens, like, you've got to choose, because Billy Gunn came out and didn't really say a lot, and basically just said, yeah, we're great, come on, like, we're the Acclaimed. Then Max Caster gave him Bowens the ultimatum: me or him, the guy that stuck by you this whole time, or the old guy. It was basically the choice. And then basically Bowens then went to Scissor with Max Caster, and instead pulled the middle finger up on him as they went to Scissor and chose Billy Gunn. Surprise, surprise. So Max Caster went, that's fine. I break up the team then. My decision, the team's gone. I've broken them up. I'm the leader. The Acclaimed are done. It wasn't anyone else's choice. It was my choice. I no longer want to tag with you. We're done. And then he leaves, and then Billy Gunn and Anthony Bowens scissor each other. Bowens even says in the promo in the build-up that he believes he can be a main event star and has everything to be a main event star in AEW. I truly believe that. I think that Bowens proved himself very much on the mic here. Bear in mind that when you look back at the acclaims of old, Max Caster absolutely blew the water out of Bowens when it came to mic work and was the guy that everyone was looking at. And as time has gone on, Bowens has just become more and more the guy. This sort of proven that that's the direction. I do worry a little bit for Max Caster that the Rocket could end up being strapped to Bowens and Caster could end up just being lost. Mm-hmm. I hope that's not the case because I hope everyone gets a spot on the card. But yeah, I do worry because Bowens seems to be their guy, and the fact that they've kept the pairing with Billy Gunn says to me they want the big name for the casual fans to be associated with Bowens. So as he rises up, people become more and more associated. It makes sense, but I do worry for Max Caster a lot. Then we got Okada versus Ishii, which for most people would be an absolute dream match. For me, I'm not from. I don't watch a lot of Japanese wrestling, so this is still very new to me. But this was a really hard hitting match. Like, although I don't watch a lot of Japanese wrestling, I know that this was classic Japanese wrestling. Hard strikes, really playing off the fighting spirit of classic Japanese wrestling. That you keep going until you've got no breath. There was an injury to Ishii. I'm pretty sure was storyline based, and they were playing off of it like Ishii is basically fighting off of one leg, but he keeps fighting because he's the valiant babyface, but in more like using the context of the Japanese wrestling style on commentary to sort of be like, he's being valiant, but not in the American way, but in the sort of Japanese way sort of thing. And it's in their sort of culture, and he's grew up in Japanese wrestling. It was really well told, and the commentary did very well of sort of explaining that for anyone that doesn't watch Japanese wrestling. Luckily, I have the context of Japanese wrestling, but I feel like anyone who was sort of going in and didn't know anything would have been able to come out of that show going, I understood what was going on. At one point, Ishii reverses the Rainmaker into one of his own. That was a really cool moment. And then basically it's a lot shorter. It's sort of builds. And then Okada basically goes to grab the ring bell, comes into the ring. The referee takes the ring bell off of him and goes, no, you can't cheat. And then Okada's like, fine, I won't cheat. Turns around, goes to do the Rainmaker, instead kicks Ishii in the balls, and then does the Rainmaker, and then wins. Retains his title, retains his Continental title. A very basic match. I think it was just to have Okada again getting just matches under his belt, defenses under his belt, and also face someone that is very well known and very well respected in Ishii. It was good, very well told. Nothing to write home about. Just a very good match. Then we had Dustin Rhodes versus Adam Priest. This is what I like to call the boring segment of Collision.
Oh, okay.
Nothing on Dustin Rhodes. This in the next match was literally like, it was almost like Squash Match Central. It was just like, okay, here's a match. Okay, here's a match until we get to the main event. It was like, okay, we've got to spare 20 minutes. Let's shove a couple of matches in. Dustin Rhodes faced Adam Priest. Adam Priest got a jobber entrance. Bar one little flurry, which was literally just a few strikes. It was a squash match. End of story. Dustin Rhodes wins. Funnily enough, Adam Priest didn't win that match. Then we had Julia Hart versus Harley Cameron. Julia Hart is still one of the coolest things in AEW. Just her entire presentation, her entire look, everything about her still feels special. She's just brilliant. They actually this is kind of what cost the match for me. They announced before the match that Julia Hart would be facing Jamie Hayter tonight. Now, obviously, at that point, Julia Hart's not losing. Like, you just know. So it kind of ruined the whole thing, because it was like, it wasn't one of those where there was almost like, oh, maybe Jamie Hayter got involved in any capacity. There was none of that. It was a very basic match, and it just went by, and that's fine. It was just very much a Julia Hart showcase against somebody who's credible, very similar almost to the Top Flight match earlier on, actually, where it was, okay, rather than just a squash match against somebody that no one really recognizes, here's a glorified squash match against someone that people do recognize, so people will put you on a higher pedestal. That's literally all it was used for. Then, surprise, surprise, Connor was right. Powerhouse Hobbs got taken out by the Learning Tree backstage. Shocker. Then we got
Sacre bleu.
No. Then we got to the main event, which was the Learning Tree and the Death Riders versus Rated FTR and the Outrunners, not Powerhouse Hobbs. Powerhouse Hobbs definitely doesn't come back later in the match. No. Would never happen. No. Of course he does.
Despite having his knee taken off at Dynamite as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where the fraud is tagging with him now. Yeah, nothing mentioned of the fraud coming out too late. It's a fraud. This I literally put classic multi-man tag. Oh no, what a surprise. Guess what happens? Everyone's in the ring at the same time. Everyone's fighting each other. There's chaos. I cannot stress this enough. This is one of my biggest pet hates in wrestling, is big multi-man matches, because they're all the same. Don't lie to me. They are all the same. It's just, don't get me wrong. There was some as the match went on, my interest came back, but that first 5-10 minutes, I didn't care, because it was just like, until this descends into chaos, none of this matters. That's the issue with massive multi-man matches like that. Until everyone ends up in the ring and fighting each other and the referee loses control, none of the match beforehand matters. And they didn't do anything to make it matter, and that was the problem. So it literally descended into chaos. The only bright spark was Big Bill got a big applause when he got into the ring. The crowd loved Big Bill despite the fact that he's a heel. When they turn that man face, that man's going to get so many cheers, the buildings are going to blow off. The heels were teaming well, despite the fact that there could have been a bit of tension between Jon Moxley and Jericho. Surprise, there wasn't. Then there was this really cool moment, actually, where Brian Keith ends up getting hit by a child. And you would think that I was lying. No, there ends up being the classic at the barricades, punching and whatever. And this one child gets really into it, very young, getting picked up by, their dad sort of thing. And, and then there was this one moment where they were just like, let's get the child to hit Brian Keith. So the faces drag Brian Keith over, and the child chops him, and Brian Keith sells it brilliantly. It was a very comedic moment. Brian Keith is brilliant. He is someone that is. It's quite funny that the Learning Tree is frustrating because of Jericho, but it's actually rising the stock of Big Bill and Brian Keith. So it's doing its job annoyingly, despite the fact that no one wants it on TV. But it's doing the job because it's putting them, making them into bigger stars than they were. Then it sort of splits off into their feuds. You have Cope and Moxley on the ramp. They have a bit of back and forth there. Then you have the Outrunners and the Learning Tree going back and forth as well. And then at one point, weirdly, you have Pac attack Cope, which makes sense because they're fighting tonight. And then you end up with, okay, where's this going to go? They then put a mask on Cope, which stops him from seeing. And commentary play it off as well as they can, being they're trying not to show him what they're doing. Makes no sense. I can't even explain why. It just doesn't make sense. And then basically, Rated FTR and and Death Riders disappear, and you end up with the learning tree and the Outrunners. Oh no, it's 3-on-2. Who's gonna come and save them? Powerhouse Hobbs comes out and basically saves them and wins the match.
I thought you were gonna say Christopher Daniels.
Oh, that would have been great.
Like the resurrection of Jesus Christ himself, but it's Christopher Daniels.
But yeah, so you had a very. I think that's possibly why as I mentioned earlier, it felt like I think the Daniels thing hurts more, is because this was the main event and there was nothing really that was like significant enough that progressed the story significantly enough to be like, oh, that's why it went on last.
Yeah.
I criticized last week on Collision for what went on last, but then mentioned that the actual post-match segment led perfectly into this that happened this week, so it made sense as to why it went on last. It went off air in chaos, makes perfect. This week it didn't. It just ended with Powerhouse Hobbs winning the match for everyone, and yay, arms raised. And I felt like they could have had that open just with a few tweaks here and there of how they did things. They literally could have just, like, they didn't even need the learning tree to attack Hobbs for Hobbs not to be there at the start of the match due to the ending of Dynamite. If they really didn't, I feel that's why it stings a little bit more. But overall, thank the Lord Collision wasn't as bad as last week, eh? It was a good show. It was a good show. There was a lot of filler on this show, but it was carried by that opening match. But the opening match just immediately gets you in. It got me interested in the whole show. Mm-hmm. It's a shame the rest of it sort of didn't live up to what the first match did, but it never was going to. Which again it was the wrong main event. But yeah, great show. Good show, better than last week. So to be honest, I think I was going to be a happy man no matter what. So
2 good shows from AEW in 1 week. What a time to be alive.
Honestly, it felt good to be like, I've sat through Collision and not felt like I wanted to gouge my eyes out. After last week, I was rightfully harsh, but harsh nonetheless. This week it was a lot more positive. There was a lot more filler, and it's still like Dynamite was up here, on a different pedestal, and then you had Collision a few notches down. Mm-hmm. It was like on a scale, you probably got Collision at good, and Dynamite at great, if not outstanding, sort of thing. Yeah. So there was a clear golfing class between the two, but again, because Collision was so bad, and because Christopher Daniels and Hangman Adam Page stole the show, it made it a good show.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, there you go. That's this week's in review of Collision. Let's take a look at the last show of the week for Monday Night Raw, shall we? So, we had Raw. Again, another show on Netflix. Another one to get through. Again, didn't feel like a very long show. A lot of stuff did happen, and there were some good matches in there, so let's get into it. So we started out by watching a few guys come in. We had Punk, Seth, Drew, and a couple of others as well. And then there was a cut to something early on the day that had been revealed on socials of Rhea getting attacked by Nia. More on that later. And then we started the show proper with Michael Cole and Wade Barrett doing their usual intro and then introducing Jay. Yeets everywhere. Jay looking like a superstar as per. Michael Cole dancing like a drunk granddad at a wedding, as Wade put it, doing his usual making up for the lack of pats. Yeets. Cole stepped in. Jay is about to start his usual shtick and start his promo, and then Gunther interrupts. Gunther comes in, does his usual dressing down of his opponent, telling Jay he isn't good enough and he will never beat him for the title, and saying that he'll probably go and run off and help Roman and friends when he needs it, but he isn't really a proper challenger to the title. Jay then fires back saying, well, only one of us is actually main evented WrestleMania, and it ain't Gunther. A brawl then ensues. And then basically that was the end of the segment. So, heading into Saturday night's main event, how much out of 10 what do you think Jay's chances are out of 10 that he wins that title?
What I think the chances are, or what I want?
What you think the chances are?
Like a 5 out of 10.
What you think it's as high as a 5?
I do, because if they want the title off of Gunther before Mania, now's the time to do it. And the reason I say that is because there's a good chance that the Mania match for Jay involves a tag match with Jimmy of some sort and a reuniting of the Usos, because that'd be a really cool moment. And I can see them doing that. I can also see them not doing that, but I feel like that might be where they go with it. And have them versus the New Bloodline in some way, shape, or form, but in a tag match, maybe with the Gorillas of Destiny, per se. Or one that involves Solo or Jacob, whatever ensures. I could see a tag match there. So I feel like there's a chance if they slightly reunite the Usos, or actually do, this could be your last chance for a while to put the title on Jay. And with Jay's popularity, that's quite a useful thing, especially with the merch he sells. I also think that, it's, if they do want to do the Gunther versus Goldberg match, that obviously doesn't need the title. Please don't have the title in that match. So therefore, he would have to lose it before Mania. To which then you could have, per se, Gunther enter the Rumble, Goldberg enter the Rumble, Goldberg eliminates Gunther, and that's how Gunther stays out of the title picture. I also think it'd be really cool to have a Elimination Chamber match where possibly, if you really wanted to, you could have Roman take the title off of Jay in the chamber, which would be really cool. And you could have all these different things play out. There are, if you want to take the title off of Gunther before Mania, now's the time to do it. The reason it's 5 is because I don't think that's what they want to do. But there's that lingering thing of, do they listen to the crowd? Do they listen to the popularity? And if they're not planning on Gunther having that title, now's the time to pull that trigger. So, and given the fact that this is Saturday night's main event, they might want to do something big on that show and have something that then bleeds in to make Saturday night's main event feel important moving forwards. For example, what happened with Owens on the last show has bled into everything else. I think they're going to want something to come from this one. You could have it be that. It would be big. It would be a shock. But you could have it.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's a good breakdown there. I think the chances are a 2 out of 10. I think if they're gonna do it, yes, it would be for unpredictability and for shock value. Hell of a time to do it would be Saturday night's main event. I also think that Triple H very much values Gunther's stock, and if he's gonna drop that title, he has to drop it at a big event. And as great as obviously Saturday night main event being there and sort of being there to continue stories, I don't think that's when they would do it. I could see there being some hijinks where Jay obviously loses on Saturday. We come to next week's Raw. Jay's not he's a bit downtrodden. He's like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do now. I've missed my shot. Gunther comes out, does his usual stick of, see, I told you what would happen. I dominated. I won. Blah, blah, blah. Jay's like, give me another shot. All or nothing. Rumble. Me, you. Title match. If I lose, that's it. You won't see me again. I'll have nothing to do with it. Whatever. You get to the Rumble. Jay wins. You could have Goldberg maybe interfere. Jay wins at the Rumble. Big moment for Jay. Huge loss for Gunther. Gunther then gets his Goldberg from there. Like you say, can do Elimination Chamber from there, whatever. But Jay gets his world title and is solidified as a main event player from there, basically. But I do think in terms of this weekend, it's a very slim chance. Would love to see it because, again, it gives you, as WWE, I think if you have a big title like that change on a Saturday night main event, it makes the future ones more watchable because it makes you think there's a chance. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do there. I also do want to point out that I would like to see some more unpredictability in title changes. I think as great as these long-term title reigns are, there does become a point where it becomes a bit predictable when people are holding and not holding the titles.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be silly fest where every week it's going to change,
No.
but have it be you have a title reign which lasts for 6 months. The next one might last for a month, 3 weeks, whatever. I don't want it to be a tossing and turning of the title changes, but having it be a little bit more unpredictable where every show there is a bit of jeopardy to it. Like when you watch the UFC, you don't go into it knowing what's going to happen. Of course, wrestling's a little bit different, but having a little bit of that element in would definitely spice things up a little bit.
Well, you see that with the mid-card bouts. They seem to be doing that pretty well with the mid-card bouts. You know, when LA Knight lost it to Shinsuke, I don't think a lot of people thought that was going to happen. When Braun lost it to Jay, no one thought that was going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, they have moments where they've been doing that, and you know the tag titles on SmackDown have been changing hands, you know, a few times in quick succession, and then it's been on DIY since. You know, and a big reason for that is it's then made DIYs feel more impressive because they had a couple quick ones, and then DIY have now taken the titles. You know, they're doing it elsewhere on the card. They just need to be braver to do it in the main event. Because right now, in terms of predicting what happens with the 4 main titles, both men's and women's, the majority of the time is becoming pretty easy to do. And bar maybe an opponent, but you know roughly maybe you either know who's beating them or you know when they're losing the title. So you either know the pay-per-view or you know the opponent. It should be, as you've alluded to there, should be neither. You shouldn't be able to actually predict when it's going to happen, and you know it's becoming too obvious at certain points. And especially when I feel like that this is sort of the issue I worry that TNA got into actually with Joe Hendry. You know, with the we have a plan for Nemeth, so we're not going to have you win the title yet. It's sort of like. But they did eventually pull the trigger. Whereas, you know, I'm noticing a lot that there are people's hot moments that are sort of going under the radar and not happening. One big one being Kevin Owens right now, and the other one being possibly Jey Uso right now, which is, you know, I'm not expecting them to pull the trigger every single time someone becomes hot and someone has a really good moment. But you look in the past and you look at the fact that Drew didn't get his moment. And you look at it took LA Knight ages to get his moment. Yes, not in the main event, but still. Then you've got the fact that Jay's never had his moment. You've got the fact that Owens seems to just be clasping at straws and doesn't get his moment. Sami Zayn is a man that has deserved that title for years and hasn't had his moment. And it's becoming to a point where you're just like, there are people that deserve that title, even if it's just for a month. You know, people complain about The Miz winning that title when it was just a transitionary one between Drew and Bobby, but it served its purpose. And also, I'm part of the camp that kind of felt like his work at that time, he did deserve a bit of flowers for it. You know, I think that I'm not expecting them to pull the trigger on every single one. That's not what I'm saying. But the fact that we are, let's be honest, very likely to get all the way to Mania without Owens or Jey Uso, despite their popularity and despite the good work they're doing, they're not going to get their flowers. They're not going to get their moment, and instead are going to end up in some mid-card match at Mania where they're no longer as hot as they were and they've lost a lot of momentum. Unfortunately, that's probably what's going to happen, and that sucks. And it's happening too often at the moment with the main titles.
Yeah. We'll see, because I do think there will be some shenanigans between now and Mania, but we'll see. So moving on from that initial segment with Jay and Gunther, we cut to New Day bumping into JBL. Bit of backwards and forwards. New Day giving JBL a couple of dollars to spread the word of the negativity they've been receiving and how it's wrong. JBL then says he understands why they got rid of Big E, because they wanted all the attention on them. Why would they want a nice, big, muscly, charismatic guy around them when they can get the attention for themselves? They then walk off in a huff. Before we get to Rhea and Kofi, it's then announced Bayley officially signed to Raw and declares for the Rumble, and then gets interrupted by Nia. More on that later. And then we cut to Rey Mysterio versus Kofi, which started with New Day coming out to the old music, which I was surprised by. I was like, hang on a second, this doesn't make sense. But then immediately they went, no, we're not using that music. Take that away. And then basically proceeded to have a go at the crowd for the negativity. And then took back their money from JBL as well, which I thought was quite funny.
I would love the music thing to become a running joke.
It probably will.
It depends on what they're doing. If Biggie is out for a while, then give him new music. If Biggie is coming back, have this running joke that they keep playing the music, and then when Biggie returns, WWE would be the biggest pop you will ever have. Will be like, because then it's almost like a tease of like, but why they keep playing the music? They keep playing the music, and then the one they don't turn it off when they say to turn it off, and then bang.
What if that's how he comes back at the Rumble?
That would be incredible.
Yeah.
I'd love everything about that. Would be for them to be like, stop playing that music, and then like I'd almost. If they're going to do it that way, I'd have them back to back in the Rumble. I would literally have Xavier come out and be like, stop playing that music, and eventually they stop. And then you have Kofi come out and the same happen, and then you have that moment. That would be... I think if Big E's coming back soon, they're going to have that be a running joke. Because then they've got the payoff for it.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So, with that being said, they cancelled the music, took the money back from JBL, and then generally this match I thought was decent. So, again, like I mentioned before, New Day come out to the old music, cancel that, take the money off JBL. Kofi goes into the match with the tougher style, intercepting a lot of Ray's moves. Again, goes backwards and forwards between Ray and Kofi. Woods being a distraction on the outside. Ray eventually hits the 619, but then Kofi counters that. But then Ray gets like a weird roll-up thing. I don't know if it was supposed to be a proper roll-up or if he just ended up on the side and then just made the most of it, just yanked his leg. Yeah. But then basically gets the win. Kofi and Woods then beat up Ray in the aftermath. LWO come out for the save. You then think Kofi and Woods have gone, but they've just basically big circle around and then attack after and then run off again. So yeah, I thought it was a decent start to the night for match-wise, and it was a good way to show off Kofi's new mentality in the ring, and obviously Woods doing his usual side heel work was good to see as well. You then cut backstage to Chad Gable, who is admitting he has a problem with luchadors, but he's gone to a man who knows all about luchadors and how to deal with them. Dirty Dominic Mysterio, and he's going to help him. What? You then get the rest of American Made, interesting enough, calling out for the women's Intercontinental title and the men's tag team titles as well. So not just being about Chad, it's about the whole group, which is good to see. And we'll see that develop over the next few weeks. Then we come to Bragster's favourite segment of the week, which is Karrion Kross, saying that he's had 4 espressos, broke some baseball bats, and him and Scarlett have thrown a guy down the stairs.
The comment, like, what I'm so surprised about is Karrion Kross's comedy recently. Like, it's so... I don't even know the word for it. I was going to say slapstick, but I'm not even sure if that's correct. But like this whole just like it's so deadpan, and it's actually it's very British.
Yeah,
is the best way of actually describing it. It's extremely British,
Hmm.
of dry humor, of not reacting at all to what you're saying, but obviously it's like hyperbole. It's very exaggerated stuff. It's so... he's really surprised me recently, and I know I've banged on about this for 3 episodes, so I'm gonna stop for it.
I don't think it's going to be just 3 though, is it? It's going to be for the rest of the year as well, so we'll see how that goes. So basically, he gets asked what is he going to be up to next, because obviously Wyatt Six have gone to SmackDown. Miz is nowhere to be seen. He's like, he's on assignment, which probably means he's on SmackDown. And basically ask him what's coming next. He says he's eyeing up Seth Rollins, he's eyeing up CM Punk, and he's eyeing up Sami Zayn. And then he says, don't believe a word that Sami says, because he doesn't believe his own words. And then gets told, well, guess who's coming onto the stage next? It's Sami. He's like, great, let's watch. And then turns around, and then Sami comes out. So Sami comes out to his usual fanfare and his chant going, declares for the Rumble pretty much straight away in his promo, says he believes he's as good as the people who declared for the Rumble, but that he doesn't have a world championship like the rest of them do. Says he doesn't need a world championship to fulfill his career and for him to be happy. If it ended tomorrow, he'd be happy with what he's done. He doesn't need anything else. But he wants that championship. The 14-year-old in him is telling him he needs to go for it and he needs to go get it. Cut to KO coming out. Again, another surprise. Was like, okay, KO's here. Let's go. And again, that element of surprise probably really added to my reaction. Sami then says to him, I knew it was a matter of time before you showed up. And KO denies that's not why he's here. He's not here to do the usual stick of, oh, you helped Roman, this, that, and the other. He understands because Sami forgave Roman, like Sami forgave KO in the past, with all the stuff that KO's done to him. And of course, they have such a monumental history that, again, Sami's forgave KO more than a fair share of times, it's safe to say. And basically, Sami says that also the reason you forgave Roman, you've forgiven me, is because you're a good person. You're the best guy I know. You're not just my best friend. You're a brother to me. And then he tells him, you can win the Royal Rumble. You 100% can. He then says that if you win the Rumble, much like he did with Rey Mysterio, if you win the Rumble, you can main event Mania and fight me for the WWE Championship. We can do this together. It could be monumental and the biggest moment of our careers, even bigger than us winning the tag titles together against the Usos. And he says, and as long as you win the Rumble, and as long as I win the championship, then that's what will happen. And then he goes on to say, but I know that'll happen, as I've got your back, and I know I'll win the title because you have my back. And I thought this bit, that bit from Kevin Owens and Sami was basically the best that they can put together.
Yeah.
It's KO playing Sami because he knows that he can get Sami to do his bidding if he pulls the right strings, and he knows him that well. And then it's Sami convincing himself that he can do these things and become the champion, but then looking so conflicted at the end, like he's like, damn, he's right. Like, we could do this. Like,
it's that moment where you can see it, as you said, you can see on his face that moment where he goes, like, he says he believes, almost harkening back to what Karrion Kross just said, that Sami doesn't believe what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sami goes on to say, I can win this, I can do this, I'm as good as everyone else. And Owens basically says, you are, but if you have help.
Mm-hmm.
And that then puts the doubt in Sami's mind of, well, can I do it on my own?
Yeah.
Like I keep saying I can. And it's just that, as you said, that sort of conflicting, it's just so perfectly told and adds that extra layer onto the entire weekend, adds that extra layer onto that title match, where I even wrote down Zayn heel turn ? With Cross doubting, with this moment here, if they really wanted to, they could have Zayn help Owens win that title. and it would make sense now.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't be out of nowhere. If they want, I don't think that's what's going to happen. But they've sown that seed where during the match you're going to think it, and that's all they needed to do. It's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, it was probably my favorite segment of the whole show because I just think it's that thing. I love wrestling to watch wrestling matches, but I love watching TV show wrestling for those segments where it pushes the story forward. And it's just those little things. And again, there's even in Punk's promo, there's a little tease at the end of it, and I'm like, oh, big things are coming here, and we haven't got long to wait either. So it's like, and that segment was perfect because it showed what KO can do to manipulate Sammy, and then it leaves Sammy with that choice, and then obviously we'll find out what happens in the end.
Yeah.
You then had a couple of quick segments where Sheamus and Braun faced off, obviously before their Intercontinental title match on Saturday. And then you had Ludwig having a nice little promo as well, saying that it's okay, I lost to Sheamus, we fought in a Raw, you don't always win, that's fine. And then called out Penta, which is a very interesting first step for Penta, if that's the feud he's going down. And I think Ludwig's done a lot in the past year to stand out on his own to be a good enough threat for Penta to take on initially. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Next up, you then had Bayley and Nia, with Roxanne Perez, funnily enough, being ringside again. Who knew that would happen? Who could see that coming? Not me. Bayley then hits Roxanne after Roxanne tried to go for Bayley during the match. So that's probably setting them up for some sort of interaction at the Rumble.
Stand and deliver.
All that too. Though it seems to me that Roxanne might be on the main roster in the very near future, probably.
I think that's going to be her swan song match in NXT. I feel like there's when you're building Mania card, because Roxanne hasn't said goodbye to NXT yet. She hasn't had that moment at the end of an NXT match where you've got the thank you Roxanne sort of trance that you get at the end of someone leaving NXT.
Yeah.
So she still needs that. And when you look at the Mania card, there's an obvious admission, which is Bayley. Put them together, have them at Stand and Deliver, have a marquee matchup on the NXT card that people can really get excited for, and gets a lot of mainstream appeal. On Mania weekend. I think it makes sense.
Fair enough. That's fair. That's very good point. Okay, so story of the match really was Bayley sort of fighting from underneath, getting frustrated because again she was hitting big moves and Nia was kicking out. Nia, when she got her momentum going, was smashing Bayley into posts, basically beating the living crap out of her any which way she could. Nia, interesting enough, ended up picking the win, getting some momentum heading into the next segment. And one thing I wanted to say is give a bit of praise to Nia, I think, because since she's come back, she has gone on leaps and bounds, and I think she's really deserved being in the position she's in. Of course, with Nia, I don't think you're ever going to get 5-star level matches out of her. But what I will say is that I actually got flashbacks to when Nia fought Bayley in NXT for the title, and I remember thinking Nia needs a lot of time in the ring here to get to the point where she was going to be. And we all remember how it ended when she left the first time WWE. It wasn't the greatest of departures. She didn't get used a lot, and she sort of drifted into the ether. But since she's come back, I think she's gone on leaps and bounds.
Yep.
Both on the mic, in the ring. I think overall she's up there now, and I think she's, whenever people are involved with her, she's a threat now. And I don't watch a I think the biggest compliment I can give to Nia as well, from that first era where everyone was saying how green she was and how likely she could be to injure somebody, is I don't watch Nia matches now with the beforehand of thinking, I hope something bad doesn't happen here. I'm watching it because she's telling a good story and she's doing well in the match. And I just wanted to give a bit of praise for Nia there on that. Next out, Rhea comes out and attacks Nia after the earlier bust-up they had before Raw started. Rhea diving off the table at Nia like a 10-pin bowling ball, going after a bunch of pins. And then basically we get confirmation later in the night that Saturday night main event is going to be Nia versus Rhea, which was a fun match last year at Elimination Chamber, and will probably be a fun time again this time round. Next, we had Dom talking to Chad Gable. Dom then hands Chad a piece of paper with someone's name on it, saying, "This is the guy you need to speak to if you want some help with luchadors." Who that could be, we'll wait and see.
I've got a guess.
Bragster has a theory. He has his hands up.
To be honest, I thought it anyway, but didn't have a reason why.
Right.
Twitter gave me a reason why. It's Aleister Black. Yeah.
Interesting.
And the reason why, I was like, but I don't know why. Why? And then, as Chad leaves, he goes, basically, I'm going to learn the dark arts of Lucha Libre.
Right.
And the wording of it is apparently the same. This is what Twitter said, so if it's wrong, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure. I triple checked it. It's the same wording of Aleister Black and Zelina Vega's training school.
Right.
So it's a direct reference to their training school, little hint for people who know, but also leaving it ominous enough where if people don't know, but by the looks of things, that could be the confirmation that Aleister Black is on his way back.
Interesting. Okay. Initially when I thought of it, I was thinking, is it maybe Andrade, and he's maybe going on a heel run? But then that makes more sense if that's it, because again, I didn't pick up on that reference because I didn't know that was the name of their wrestling school. So, well done to you and Twitter for your investigative journalism. So Chad then goes off saying, "Don't worry, I'm going to go learn the dark arts," like you say. And then Liv and Dom and everybody's talking, and then basically Dom, it's found out, is going to replace Finn for the tag title match next week with the Raw Raiders, as Finn's still out injured. We'll find out what happens from there, and basically.
Liv's little mischievous, because it's Dom's idea, and then she goes, "Oh, Dom, you're like the mastermind of the group." I stand by what I said last week. This is how Dom ends up on SmackDown. I think that this is Liv's punishment. She's not angry, in inverted commas, not angry with Dom because of the way that he was with Rhea after the title match. And this is her little bit of revenge, is Dom's come up with this idea that he will replace Finn in the match. They'll then lose. Liv's obviously just gone, "Oh, that was your idea." And then when Finn comes back, it will be Dom's idea, and that's how they get rid of Dom. Okay. Is how I see things going.
Fair enough. Yeah,
very cleverly done. If that is the case, it is very cleverly done.
I also think it could be how you get Liv over there as well. Because could Liv going after the other championship, essentially, being Dom's plan that you mentioned before. But we'll see. We'll see how it pans out. So, next up, you had Pete Dunne and Penta. Again, they got plenty of time in this match for it to build, and I think with the way Pete was working it at the start, with obviously the joint manipulation and sort of torturing Penta and really putting him through the ringer, I think that kind of lended itself quite nicely. Did chuckle at Michael Cole's slip of the tongue. Instead of calling him Butch, she called him Bitch instead, which I thought was quite funny. And Wade had a line ready for that as well. One note I had on this was there's some sick people in this world, and Pete Dunne is one of the sickest by, again, some of his moves. And again, I thought, like I said before, it was a great I thought it was a great match. Again, Penta looking great, Pete looking good as well, and Penta continuing that momentum from the first week as well, which was vital as well.
I just feel like it was a very cleverly booked match in the sense of what they've just done is they've gone week 1, here's some flippy doos. Week 2, here's some ground and pound wrestling. Yeah. So you're learning that Penta can mix it up. It wouldn't surprise me, and Ludwig actually kind of fits into that sort of more hard hitting, striking maybe style of. They're sort of showing the audience, they're showing, not telling, which is really good. of Penta can do this style, Penta can do this style, Penta can do this style, and as a fan, you go, he can do anything. Rather than telling the audience he can do anything, you're showing the audience he can do anything. And then when he has a good showing in the Royal Rumble or whatever, then that'll impress people again, and then you can build off of it. I think they're cleverly doing it where they're sort of building of Penta in terms of the casual audience will understand week to week more of what he can do.
Yep, absolutely. No, and it was another great week, like we were saying. Unfortunately, after that, we had another Logan Paul video package that was there again.
He's there next week.
Yeah, great. Fantastic.
He's going to be there. He might even be wrestling, but he's going to be there.
It's a shame. It's a shame because it's in Atlanta, and Atlanta is a very near and dear place to my heart for people that know me. And why they had to ruin it with his presence, I don't know. But hey ho, I guess we'll celebrate it when Logan gets his title win at some point this year. Anyway, we cut to happier times, and CM Punk coming through the crowd, high-fiving the fans, the man of the people that he is, the voice of the voiceless. Of course, goes into his interview in the middle of the crowd, calls himself a maker of history, headlining the Netflix debut, and when the pressure is on, no one can beat him. That's when he comes alive. He can't see Cena throwing him over the top rope. See what he did there. Roman Reigns needed his help when he needed it in Survivor Series, put Drew in the dirt in Hell in a Cell, and don't ask him about Sami Zayn as he's not on his level. And then probably my favourite line is he'll put Hulk Hogan's dusty ass over the top rope and kill Hulkamania once and for all. Please, God, please. And then the most interesting line, like I mentioned before, is that if he needs to, he will be calling in favours at the Rumble. Oh, please.
I've told you once, and I'll tell you again. Despite what everyone is saying, CM Punk is winning the Royal Rumble. He's winning it. And everything, like, everyone's ignoring him because everyone's looking at Cena, and then Roman declares, and everyone's like, oh, it's going to be Roman. No, it's going to be Punk. It's going to be Punk. He's going to call in the favor. Going to do it.
Well,
he's going to do it.
I would agree. I'm not saying he's not going to call in the favor, but I'm just wondering if the favor doesn't work. Because this sort of build-up of Punk was very similar to what we had last year before the Rumble, where Punk was very confident going in. And generally, when Punk is this confident, something goes wrong. And I just have a feeling at the Rumble, something is going to go wrong, and there's going to be more to the Punk story than him just winning the Rumble. Again, I personally think he will win the Rumble, but I can see they've got a deviation if they want to put it in there. So we'll wait and see, of course. But again, Punk was on the show for a minute and a half and utilized it as well as anyone has done on the show, I think. Next up, you had the... Can't believe the word's going to come out of my mouth. Pure Fusion Collective versus Damage Control.
Yep.
First point, who in God's green creation called that team Pure Fusion Collective? You're telling me you sat down and put your heads together and you couldn't think of a better name?
It's a genius name. It's genius. Like, honestly, you think of the greats, you think of the Legion of Doom, you think of Brothers of Destruction, you think of DX, you think of Pure Fusion Collective.
Oh.
So they're on that level. So
just why? So the standout moment was Zoe coming from the top rope and basically drop kicking the Damage Control into oblivion. That was pretty much the standout moment, but Damage Control ended up getting the win.
I've written one note. Well, I've written multiple notes, but one note that's important. Makes me sad for Baszler.
Literally, my main question is, why is she so underutilized?
Like, they're going into a Royal Rumble where she has the joint most with Belair and Nia Jax, the joint most eliminations in a single Royal Rumble match. right? And they are not playing off of it at all. They're not utilizing it. They've shown the graphic on multiple occasions on both TV and on social media, and they're not once using it. Use it. The other two people on that list are both in high profile positions on the card. You've got a perfect moment to go, Shayna's not in a lot of confidence at the moment, but she's got this. We know that she's got it in her. Like the fact that, and they're having her take the pin in this match, and it's like, this is Shayna Baszler. This is the woman that destroyed NXT, and even in the ring, right? And I have to put at least some of the blame on Shayna a little bit, because in the ring she just doesn't look like the beast that we know Shayna has been and all this time, and it's so sad to watch somebody go from one of the best things in wrestling, let alone women's wrestling, one of the best things in wrestling, to a complete and utter afterthought and almost a joke on the roster. It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah, and again, it's those memories of that run on NXT where she was so dominant and so brutal and brilliant, really. And then, again, you had that sort of the weird, I would call it, feud with Ronda, which really should have made her, based on the status of Ronda at the time. It should have made her, and she should have gone on. And again, you've got the back end of Vince's booking and obviously non-belief in Shayna at all, which was quite frankly crazy. I'm hoping that Triple H is gonna build her again. It's going to take a while, but I'm just hoping that this, even though the name of the group is, I don't even know how to describe it, terrible is the word. If they can build her from here, then it's one hell of a return job. But she's been so underutilized, and really could have been one of the missing pieces in that women's division for a long while. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with the Pure Fusion Collective and see if it builds them. Because again, I also think Zoe is someone that could be big in the future as well. I mean, you see moves like that, diving from the top rope and drop kicking them. Like, I mean, there's clearly something there.
One thing with Zoe is the reason she's almost a detriment to like herself, because she does everything perfectly. Like, she's one of those wrestlers, there just are some that execute moves perfectly every time. The reason that dropkick looks so good, the majority of the time when dropkicks look good, is partly because they kind of mistime it. and it's more brutal. No, it looked good because it was so perfectly timed. That Zoe start, but she's almost like a detriment to herself because she's so good and such a safe pair of hands that they're just never going to go all the way to the top, because she's so useful, so easy to put with new talent, so easy to put over other people, so easy to make other people look good, that she's just going to end up in the same position that Dolph Ziggler did for so many years.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the name that came to mind when you were describing that. Dolph was the one that came into my head as well. So moving on from that, we go to the main event, which again got a really good hype package in front of it of Seth v. Drew, and obviously their history going from Mania all the way through the Punk stuff and everything in between. Again, started off pretty well. You then had Drew throwing Seth over the announce table, which was brutal. Seth was, again, a bit more vicious in this match as well, scraping at Drew's eyes at one point, driving Drew into like 3 of the 4 posts. And it was really backwards and forwards between the pair of them. I don't think there was really one person who have more momentum over the other. You then had Seth locking in the crossface, and then afterwards getting in Drew's face when he managed to get to the rope. Drew then smack talking Seth, clotheslining him repeatedly, and then Drew attacks Rollins again, but then Seth gets the jackknife pin for the win. So again, another surprise pin for Drew where he's not seen it coming, similar to like he did with Jay in the Netflix debut with the roll-up. And then Drew, obviously not happy with the defeat, attacks Rollins after the surprise pin, and then has Rollins set up for Claymore for his head against the post. Obviously not a position you really want to find yourself in, especially when there's a big bulky man like Drew McIntyre about to flail his foot at you. And then Sammy comes in to make the save. And then it got interesting. Drew then takes Seth into the corner, and Sammy goes for a haluva kick. Drew, sensing it coming, dodges. Sammy kicks Seth by accident. And then the show ends with Sammy going, hey, listen, hey, wasn't intentional. I was going for Drew. And Seth just looking at him and say, what the shit? And basically the show ends. So leading you to go into next week going, where the hell do we go next? Because, and again, it's the next week, it's the Raw before the Rumble. So you're gonna expect fireworks there at some point. So yeah,
everything just links. That's what I love about the ending. I literally put just like good Rumble build, so many stars, because you've got the fact that like people who have issues with Sammy going into that Rumble, ignore just on the big stars alone. You've now got Seth, Drew. Punk mentioned that he's far better than Sammy, and that's just immediately off the top of my head. That's not including the others that are probably on that list. Yep. It's they've weaved all of the big stars that are going into that Rumble all together, and managing to make it where no matter what combinations are in that Rumble match during the match, you're like going to have at least two stars who hate each other in the ring at the same time. Even if Sammy gets eliminated at like number 15 or whatever, you know that someone at the start, let's say Punk starts near the start or whatever, that them two are going to have some issues because of what's going on here. So it's just a brilliant Rumble build rather than the traditional build of big brawl in the ring and everyone's throwing each other over the top rope. Just weaving in these stories and making it all like they can all beat each other. They're all as good as each other. They all also don't trust or like each other. Just immediately creates this nice weaving throughout the entire Rumble that just makes, it's making it got potential to be one of the best Rumbles ever.
Absolutely. And again, one of the best Rumbles ever, but I also think we could be heading for an all-timer in WrestleMania, to be fair. The way it's building, I think we could be... Obviously, a lot can happen between now and then, because it is in the middle of April, so there's a lot of shows to get through, and a lot of things can happen. But if it hits like I think it's going to hit, I think we could be on for an all-timer. Really, really exciting time, obviously, to be a wrestling fan, especially being in Rumble season and then the build to Mania from there. But yeah, that was Raw, and that was the week fully reviewed. That was a lot to get through.
What a week of wrestling.
A full week.
What a week of wrestling.
I might have to take a nap after that, I think. But yeah, I think overall, 4 great shows. Nothing to really... Obviously, not every segment was a home run, but I think for the most part, all the shows were good.
And you've got to think, within all of that, you've got TNA putting on a pay-per-view that made headlines and, got everyone really excited about TNA again. I say again as if they haven't been exciting for a while, but, it's, this is in a week where we've only reviewed the weekly shows. That's not including the fact that you've got an entire TNA pay-per-view that's just, took the wrestling world by storm. It's this been a really good week for wrestling. And given the fact that this week is Saturday night's main event. Next week is the Royal Rumble. We are on a really hot train. And then, we're probably, I don't know the dates off the top of my head, but not long after that is going to be an AEW pay-per-view. So, we're in for a lot of really good wrestling in weeks to come, all the way into Mania. This is how we expect January to feel as a wrestling fan, and it feels exactly what we want to feel.
Exactly that. So with that, folks, we will leave it for this week's episode of Taking...
Did you forget,
no,
Mr. Grimmy?
I just wanted to test you.
Did you? Is this the second week of testing me?
Yes. I'm going to do this every week unless you remember.
No, I will always remember.
I want to go home.
No, because it's taking the Pins Wrestler of the Week.
Jesus Christ. Right. Okay.
Grimmy.
Yep.
Last week, you picked Penta.
I did.
And I picked Powerhouse Hobbs. They were
Yes.
the first winners and Wrestler of the Week. So, after such a good week of wrestling, including promos, matches, etc., who is your Wrestler of the Week?
I'm going to go KO. I think because of SmackDown and Raw and just that little pulling of Sammy's strings. It just set things up nicely, I think.
KO is a really good choice because he was on my list as well.
You probably have a list of about 20.
No, I had a list of 2.
Oh, wow.
And you helped me make my choice a little bit easier because one was Kevin Owens, who does win a point on the Wrestler of the Week leaderboard as we head into the year. But I'm going to give it to a man that I cannot give the award to again for the rest of the year. Or forever.
I was about to call you out if you didn't pick this guy after the speech you gave about him.
Christopher Daniels, isn't it? It's like, you know, what a way to go out. You know, if you're going to leave the wrestling business, that's how you want to leave. You know, the ring. And it was just, sublime. But yeah, two standouts. I don't think there was anyone else that got on the level of those two this week. They both stole the show for their respective shows. You know, I promise I'm not just an AEW guy, but they've done well over the last 2 weeks. But yeah, Christopher Daniels and Kevin Owens are taking the Pins Wrestler of the Week.
Right. And on that note, we shall bid you a farewell, ladies and gentlemen. If you did enjoy today's episode, or if you've watched any other episodes before, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Again, greatly appreciate anybody who has taken the time to watch. Leave a comment on your thoughts on your favorite matches, favorite wrestlers, favorite segments. Love to hear your thoughts on the wrestling of the week as well. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one, guys. Thanks so much for watching. And next week, we'll be previewing the Rumble. See you then.